Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey, before we move forward, I just want to talk about the new opening music we had, the introductory music you just heard. I'm really digging it. It's actually the tail end of the song Fire and Blood, which is the fifth song off the album Black Rain by the Irish band called Samarkind, Samarkind. And Michael Kulbaka, who's the guitar player, and David Byrne, the vocalist, were kind enough to let me use this as my opening. And I just want to tell you a couple of things about these guys because they're really cool. Michal is an amazing guitarist, and you can go online and look up Freddie King's The Stumble and check out his YouTube channel. And if you like it, you should subscribe. His last name is Kulbaka, Kulbaka, and his first name is Michal, Michal. Great guitar player. And if you're thinking his name sounds familiar, you're right. I interviewed him last year, and you can listen to his interview online. Just go to the website, everyonelovesguitar.com, or look on iTunes and look up Kulbaka, Kulbaka. Also, I've actually taken a number of guitar lessons from Michal, and I can tell you with 100% confidence, he's a very competent and just an incredibly caring teacher. I've had a lot of guitar teachers. He goes way beyond the call of duty to really make sure that like you're getting as much as possible out of your work with him. It's not just having a good work ethic. He actually gives a shit. You know, he really cares about, are you progressing? Are you comfortable? Are you getting where you want to go and stuff like that? And if you're interested in connecting with him about lessons, go to his Facebook page. Again, his name is spelled Michal, Michal, Kulbaka, Kulbaka, and it's not a personal page. It's a fan page, and you can message him on there. And that's it. If you don't know Samarkind, please check them out. Their first album, again, it was called Black Rain. This is the tail end of the song Fire and Blood, which is the fifth song out of the album. They're out of Ireland, then get ready to do a tour of England and then the rest of Europe. And I'd appreciate if you like their music, you support them because they deserve it. They're really cool guys. And let me know what you think of the opening music. I'll see you on the inside. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you enjoy the new intro music. And thanks very much, Michal and David Byrne and all the rest of the guys at Samarkind. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise.
Right.
Hey, everybody. This is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and I'm with the one and only Ryan Wariner today. Ryan's been playing guitar seriously since he was 8. He's out of Nashville right now, actually. He's been around guitars for longer than he could remember. After playing for years in van and trailer rock and roll bands, he finally ended up getting a call for Nashville sideman gig at the age of 22, and he's been doing them ever since. All the while, he's maintained really cool personal side rock projects along the way. His sideman gigs have included working with Leann Rimes. He worked with Jewel for 10 years. Gretchen Wilson, Shooter Jennings, Gary Allan, which is who he's out with now, and Gene Simmons, just to name a few. He also does do some steady studio work, and his credits include playing with Megadeath and Chris Cornell, and we'll talk about those today. And all the while, he stayed obsessed with classic rock music that inspired him to start playing in the first place, and he's maintained a borderline addiction to guitar gear. Like I guess most guitarists. Ryan's dad is actually Steve Wariner, who's had a great career of his own and was one of Chet Atkins' certified guitar players. If you want to go back and listen to Steve's interview, I interviewed Steve in episode 243, and you can find that on the everyonelovesguitar.com website or on iTunes. And it was really cool. I happened to run into Ryan and Steve at NAMM, so I got to meet him in person, so that was really nice. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate your time.
Oh, man, I'm glad to be here. It's cool. You've interviewed a lot of people I know and look up to, you know. I guess I first heard about it on the Rob McNally episode because he's kind of been a mentor to me. And my dad was like, oh, I'm going to do it. And then we ran into each other at NAMM, and it all worked out. So
Yeah, it was cool. It was very cool.
Dad wanted to go visit a couple people at NAMM, and he doesn't have between his ability, like he loves talking to people and like, and that, and then also people that recognize him whenever he kind of needs me to kind of go with him. So he's like, man, you got to meet me down there. I want to go, but I can't go by myself. So I had the afternoon off, and it all worked out. So
yeah, that's what he was telling me. It was really funny because while I'm talking to him, a line of people starts forming behind him. And I'm like, Steve, there's a line of people. He goes, I know he goes, I'll talk with them in a minute. And, and he was super gracious and, but I get it that, he needs like a wingman.
Yeah. And my mom, usually she's good at that because she kind of has been managing him forever. But when it comes to this stuff, she was just like, no, you go. But when I was a kid, when I first started getting into guitar, he took me to a couple times to guitar shows, like when they were having them at the, whatever airport hotel it was when I,
yeah,
looking at vintage guitars. And then we went like once or twice and stopped going because it was like we didn't walk in the door anyway. It was just taking pictures and stuff like that. So, but now as I'm older, I'm the escort. So
yeah, man, that's cool. Hey, there are worse problems to have, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, so you got your first sideman gig at 22. That's really young. What were you doing like before that?
Well, like you said there earlier on, I mean, I was playing in bands the whole time, really like not officially playing, like not playing in bands really till I got out of high school. I went to like a pretty stuffy private school where nobody played music. It was a football school,
Sure.
But when I got
in
out,
Nashville?
Yeah. And down in Franklin, which is, like 30 minutes south.
Sure.
And, so I didn't have any friends I had a ton of friends that played guitar and were musicians, but they were all my dad's band guys or other people that my dad knew. Like I only was ever around guys in their, 10 years older, 10, 20 years older than me. But at school, I didn't know there was nobody. There was like maybe a couple dudes that had acoustics that like Dave Matthews, but no serious musicians, no bands. So I only ever jammed with like people my dad knew, and I'd get up and play with his band or whatever. But, after high school, I started, right away started playing with this band of guys in town and trying to do the rock thing, van and trailer. And then, but during that time, instead of going to college, I saw, my mom told me about this. She saw in the paper they were opening a guitar store in Franklin, Cool Springs area, kind of where the mall is and stuff. And it was a Chambers Guitars, which was like a local chain around Middle Tennessee. There was one in Murfreesboro, one on West End, and then this one in Franklin. And Joe Chambers, knew my dad or whatever. So I called him up and asked him if I could work at his store. And I went down there the day they opened and ended up running that store for like three and a half years.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. And like he's like a second dad to me or uncle or, he'd probably want me to say cool older brother, but no, more like a dad or something. But he later sold all the stores and put everything in one basket and took a chance and started the Nashville Musicians Hall of Fame downtown. And
that's him?
That's him. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was just down there at the Rolling Stones exhibit hanging with, and went and saw him. And I saw couple of his kids that I like, his one kid who works there now. I saw him last time I saw him, he was like 13 and now he's like 6'4", adult. But yeah, Joe and his family treated me like family, and a couple other guys that came up in town worked for him at the same time, like same age as me. And kind of like, we started in the sort of at the store and playing in band, around town at the same time was my buddy Stanton Edward, who now plays with the Wallflowers.
Yeah. I interviewed Stanton.
We were working at the guitar store together and he worked at the one in Nashville and I worked at the one in Franklin. And we would just, when it wasn't busy, we'd sit on the phone and talk about Jeff Beck and, hey, have you bought this? Do you have the Stones Black and Blue album? Have you ever listened to that one? And that shit like that. And so, and he's still one of my best buddies to this day. I just got him on the Jewel gig and had him play with me out in Vegas last April.
But that's right. He's on that. That's right. He does Jewel.
Yeah, I got him on that. But because there was a few things that I couldn't do. A little holiday run she did last year, and I was busy with Gary. But she still had me put the band together. So I called him. I was like, "You're gonna love this guy." And truthfully, we've been friends since this store days, and we were like 19. That's
really cool.
Yeah, but that was what I always say. Instead of going to college, man, I literally spent 3.5 years. I mean, every day we're open, I opened the store, closed it. It was Joe would pop in and maybe a few times a week at most, but he was just from like day 2. He gave me the alarm code and the keys and said, "Man, this is just take care of it, and if you need anything, call me." And if you want to come in at 2 a.m. and borrow a guitar or sit around and play guitar at 2 a.m, I don't care. Just do whatever you want.
That's a pretty good gig.
He was the best, man, and he still is. He's one of the funniest guys. But he really is like family, and he. But yeah, he was even like, yeah, sometimes if you just can't sleep and you want to come over and play guitar, just do it. Or if you have a session or you got to do something, he goes, just borrow whatever and bring it back when you can't. Bring it back when you're done with it, and we're all good.
That's great, man.
Yeah, and he treated us like he used to go around all the guitar shows, and he'd take Stanton with him, and he'd be like, "Hey, let's pop at this casino real quick and play some craps." And they'd come back with like a couple grand in their pocket. He's the coolest guy, man. Still is.
And so so you were doing that, and then you got the sideman call. How did you get that, and what was that first gig?
Well, honestly, it's back to Rob McNally, who I said was a mentor to me, who you interviewed already. I knew Rob. There's a guy in town named Jeff Sin who was, I'm going to say this probably a bunch of times, that I have people that are like family, and it's true. I just have I've been in Nashville my whole life, so I know a lot of people for a long time. And
sure. Jeff
Sin is one of those people. I've known him since I called him out of the blue one day when I worked in the store, because he builds like, Telly and Strat relic type guitars. And I wanted a Telecaster like Keith Richards, with, the macabre Keith Richards guitar. And so I called him out of the blue. He built me this guitar and introduced me to Rob, and they both were kind of mentored me a lot when I was in that guitar store era. And Rob, always was a big fan of my guitar playing. Like the first time I went to his house, I thought I just sort of was all right and did my thing. And I still think that, but Rob was like, dude, when I realized that he thought I was actually good is when I thought, well, maybe my dad wasn't just being nice,
Yeah. That's Rob he's an amazing player. So if he likes your stuff, man, that's feather in your cap. That's great.
Yeah. And so, but I'm trying not to meander too much, but my first job was a country gig. It's why I've lived a lot of my life in the country world, by default of being in Nashville. But it was from this country group. It was 3 sisters. They're called Shadazy, which is like the weakest, name ever. But but I was really excited because, well, I'd never had a gig like that before. Never made money on a gig once in my life at that point. And Dan Huff produced them. They were kind of his first. They were his first entrance into producing. One of his first entrances into producing, records and like national records. And they were basically like when you hear Rascal Flatts now, it was the same thing except 3 chicks instead of 3 guys.
Gotcha.
And they were awesome to me. I haven't seen them in years, but they treated me really well, and I met a bunch of people that I'm really close. But came about because the band leader who was actually the rhythm guitar player. They were looking for more of the young rock and roll lead guitar player. And his name was Chris Graffinino, and he was the band leader, musical director kind of thing, but secondary guitar. And he had gone to college with Rob. They moved here from Columbus, Ohio together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like Rob and Chris and this other guy named Eric Fritsch, who owns a studio here on the East Side, who I've worked with a ton. They all came here together, with hopes and dreams, that whole story. And so anyway, the guitar player who had been playing with Shadazy, who was Ed Easton, who's with Carrie Underwood for 15 years probably, Ed left and started playing with Carrie. And Graf called Rob and just said, hey, man, I'm looking for somebody. They want young, kind of hip looking or rock and roll, whatever that was. He goes, and hopefully good too. And Rob immediately told him me.
That's really cool.
And Rob didn't give me any heads up on it or anything. And I was actually, at the time, I just moved back in with my parents. This band I was in had fallen apart. We had this band house out in the country, out in Franklin, and we had all moved away out of it. And anyway, and I just stopped working at the store. Joe closed all the stores down, sort of not at the same time, but when mine got closed down, he was pulling everything to start the Hall of Fame. So I literally was like, well, the store closed. And the band that we thought we were going to, everybody's first band, they think you're going to kill it and be huge. That didn't happen. And I was literally like just a bum at my parents' house, and I woke up one morning and had a voicemail from this guy Chris Graffinito, and he said, "We need a guitar player. This is what the gig is. This is what it pays. I heard about you from Rob McNally, and if Rob said, I'll never forget this because sounds like something out of a movie, but it's the truth. He said, if Rob said you're good enough, you're good enough. So if you want the gig, call me and you're hired."
Wow.
Yeah. So I've never auditioned for a gig in my life, man, and it's probably because of that. Because once you do one, prove that you're not a flake, But all he wanted to do was we met at this coffee shop in town called Sam and Zoe's. And he was like, "Let's just meet me at Sam and Zoe's." He goes, "I just want to see what you look like. And I want to," and he was a guitar nerd too, especially back then. And he goes, "I just want to know what you look like." And he goes, "And I want to just meet you. And, I want you, let's talk about gear. I want to see what kind of gear you have." And he just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to show up with like some kind of BS. Like, well, I've got not that there's anything wrong with Line 6 practice amps, because I have one, but like that I only had a Line 6 practice amp and a Squier, what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a time and place for every piece of gear, but he just wanted to make sure I had cool stuff or the right stuff or whatever. And so I met him at he said, "Yeah, man, well, I told him I was playing an orange amp at the time. I said, "Yeah, I got an orange and a Les Paul and a couple Strats and Italian." He was like, "All right, cool. Well, come to rehearsal and you're in the band." And that was it. I haven't been with a gig or off the road since then.
So that came at,
it's just like they've all rolled into each other.
It's great how that just, sometimes that happens when, kind of cliche, but when one door closes, another one opened up, but it opened up pretty darn quickly for you. That's great.
Yeah.
Man.
It was like, it's still long enough now that I can't remember how long I was home, but it was not long. We closed that store down right after Christmas. And then I think he called me in March. I think it was like I was done in January. I think I bummed around for 4 to 6 weeks, and then I was gone. Then I was gone for 80, all of a sudden I was playing 80 shows with them and on a bus and meeting people that I was, in the band with some musicians that I still love and respect to this day. Guys that are everybody that's came through that band when I was there are still working and are like killing it.
So
the drummer, the guy who was with Stapleton now and played on Stapleton's Grammy-winning records, and he just got nominated for CMA Drummer of the Year and all that stuff. And he was a dude we used to sit in the back lounge back then and talk about, Allman Brothers records and stuff.
Who is that?
His name's Derek Mixon. He's my favorite drummer to this day, and he's played in bands with me I've used him on pretty much everything I've done since.
That's great, man.
And he's like the perfect mix. I was on a session last week and I was like, man, Derek is the guy that should be doing the session. He's the perfect mix of like Jim Keltner. On one end of the spectrum is Jim Keltner. The other end is Levon Helm. And he is right in the blend of that. Like, never overplays and the groove is always perfect. He's absolutely, absolutely my fave.
How did you get the Jewel gig?
The Jewel gig, gosh, let me think. Oh, there is a good story there. The Jewel gig came I did the Shadazy thing for like 2 years, summers.
Are they still around?
No, they just, how the business is.
Yeah.
They hit a wall with labels and radio play and all that stuff. And they had a bunch of hits. They had a big record. Vinny Colaiuta played on their records. It's Dan Huff, Vinny Colaiuta. It was pretty.
Oh my God.
It was serious. And their last record before the last one they had that I toured with them, the second cycle through, was produced by John Shanks.
Oh, wow. I interviewed John.
Great guitar player. Yeah, he played great guitar all over everything, and Dan's all over his stuff. So it was a lot cooler gig than the name would imply. But but the sisters, they like got married and started having kids and stuff like that, and just kind of it just sort of worked out that they just all came to a stopping point. Nothing bad happened. It was just kind of a natural thing. It sort of went away.
Yeah, that happened.
So then after that, I did some other stuff, and then the Jewel thing happened. I got a call she was doing like, quote unquote, coming to Nashville. She had been in LA and had all these big, massive tours. She was with Irving Azoff and all these big tours with massive bands. But she was going to do this Nashville record. She did a record that was actually produced by John Rich, of all people. And he produced this record on her, which, not that he's not a good country producer, just like that matchup was unexpected to me. And the guy that had worked, somebody that was, the dude that was kind of like helping tour, like who's tour managing her and stuff like that. And he was a manager here in town. And he called me and we talked for a while about doing the gig. And I don't know where he heard my name the first time, but we talked about it for a while. And actually, he sent the Adam Schoenfeld, who's a guitar player now for Tim McGraw.
Sure.
And Schoenfeld's a great player and a great dude, and it's been awesome to me along the way. And he called me and we talked for a while about the gig, and I thought I had it. I was like, he's like, yeah, all right, we'll get the manager to call you. And I talked to the manager, and I was like, okay, we're in. And then like weeks went by and I never heard anything. And I was like, well, I guess it didn't happen. So I went about my merry way. I was doing I was doing a lot of other stuff at the time. And then I got a call from this guy named Ethan Pilzer, who's a killer bass player in town. And he was now the band leader for Jewel. And he said, hey man, he goes, I'd heard that they talked to you about doing this Jewel gig, and they went another way out of a recommendation of somebody in the band. Somebody that was already in the band said, oh no, my buddy would be better. And because we didn't know each other from Adam, and he didn't know if I played worth a crap or not.
Sure.
So anyway, they went with another guy who they rehearsed. They booked SIR for like 3 weeks. They put together this killer band, and I love the guy that they had. His guitar playing is great, and as a person, I love him too. But it just didn't work out. So they did like 3 weeks of rehearsals, and then did one gig, and then she fired him.
Oh.
And so Ethan, basically Schoenfeld was the MD because he had been in that John Rich camp and he helped put the band together, but he wasn't going to tour with them. He played the record. He just said, like, it happens here from time to time. They're like, yeah, I'll help MD, but I'm not playing in the band. I've done it for Jewel. I've done it for Gretchen too. And anyway, so he had gone with the recommendation of his buddy, and they got this other guy in the band. And so that's why I never heard that whole time they'd been rehearsing, and they went off and running and sort of forgot to tell me. And anyway, they rehearsed this guy for 3 weeks at SIR, and then they did one show with her, and she just wasn't digging it. And it wasn't the guy's playing. I don't know. I think it was just a gelling thing because his guy plays great. And so Ethan now is scrambling to to find somebody. And so they said, well, we had talked to Ryan about doing it. So he called me. This is like a Monday. And he's like, hey man, they had went with somebody else. It didn't work out. Can you do the gig? And I was like, yeah, man, I'm in. And he's like, well, we're leaving on Thursday to go to New York to film an A&E special and to do Conan and the Today Show or whatever, Regis and Kelly or whatever it was. And, so he's like, I need to get you the songs like tonight because we're rehearsing Thursday and leaving Friday morning.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, well, and I've always been confident in learning songs. I got a good memory and I just kind of feel it well. I'm not really a chart guy, but I can remember a lot of stuff. So I was like, yeah, I get it. And they sent over, that night I got like 24 songs from him. And he was like, all right, well, we're rehearsing Thursday and we're leaving Friday morning. And so I for like a split second, I thought, well, they didn't like the guy that rehearsed with them for 3 weeks. And now I'm going to have 2 days to learn everything. Let's see how this goes, And and he gave me some board tapes from the rehearsals. He gave me board tapes from like her 2 or 3 previous tours. And I kind of listened to the board tape of the rehearsal of the guy that just got fired. And I heard a few things that I thought I would do different. Mm-hmm. So I made a couple notes and said, do this instead of that, man. And it worked out. And that was 10 years ago. And I still, she doesn't do work enough for me to be a primary thing, but I still work with her 10 years in. That's
amazing. That's a really long, that's like a pretty substantial part of your entire life, actually.
Yeah. And, we'd go a year here and there without playing. Because she's, she got busy getting married and have a kid, and then she has the ability. She's like the queen of the coffee house style thing. That's where she came up, playing acoustics. So she might go a couple of years of just doing acoustic gigs. But anytime we've done band shows, other than me subbing out to Stanton over Christmas, I've done them for 10 years. But yeah, I just kind of came in a rehearsal and put my head down, and we blew through it at SIR. And the next day, I'm in New York. We're, like I said, filmed an A&E special, did Conan, and also she threw at me that. So we had filmed that A&E special like that Friday night.
Right.
It went well. It was the first night with the new band, and because the keyboard player had changed when I changed too. And so she was like, I'm excited about my new band and this tour we're about to do. So let's go out and have sushi. She took us all out to Nobu and had sushi.
Oh my God. That is a huge chunk of change.
Yeah. So we're sitting there having sushi and like a little sake, you know, or whatever. Back then she used to like sake. It kind of got me onto it. And so we're having, you know, a little sake and sushi with the band and kind of like, here we go. This next year is going to be awesome. And she goes, hey, Ryan, tomorrow morning I'm going to do Regis and Kelly. I can't remember if it was Kelly or Kathy Lee at the time, but anyway, Regis. And she's like, I'm thinking about doing this song by myself, or I might do this song that needs a guitar. And I want to stand up and sing like, you know, Loretta Lynn style with just a guitar and, you know, me up front with a mic. And it's not a song that I was in my 24 songs that I had learned. And she goes, are you up for it? Wow. Now that I know her, I realized she probably was testing me. She likes to test people. And I went, yeah, of course. And so she was like, all right, well, it's 10:30 at night. We've been drinking sake and you got to be your car's going to be there for you at 5 a.m. at the hotel. And we've never played the song. I've never heard it until that morning. And we worked it out, arranged it while she was in curlers and hair and makeup and stuff. And worked out our little arrangement and did it. And it went off pretty seamlessly, I will say, not to pat myself on the back, but it went off better than I even thought it was going to. And I think that was it. I think after that, she was like, wow, nothing really phases you. She always used to say, you're so cool, but not like, you know, Fonzie cool, more like nothing bothers you.
Yeah.
And she was like, you're like the coolest guitar player I've had. Nothing bothers you. And so I think it was because of that, kind of standing up to the test. And we've been really close since, and I've worked with her for, it's been 10 years of on and off stuff since. So
that's great, man. That's what have been the big changes, like not only for you during that time, but also for that gig? Cause I'm sure that it's not the same gig it was 10 years ago.
No. You know, I liked it more 10 years ago because I like where I am now more, and where she is, our relationship is better, you know, is way closer now. I only say I liked it more then because that was a primary. We were out with buses and, you know, doing, you know, shed and arena touring, you know, 85 shows that year or something. And that was great. And the band was really good then. Ethan put together a monster band, and, or Adam and Ethan, to combined. And I loved that band. It's still one of my favorites I've ever been in. And really some of the most proud I've been playing in a band. Like, man, I'm really playing with these guys are seriously awesome. Every one of them was top notch, still is. But we worked all the time.
Yeah.
We're tight. I like that. The Jewel thing now is different. It's fun, but it's a lot of work now because, we'll go, like, for instance, in 2015, we did the show, some big event at the Atlantis in the Bahamas. We hadn't played a show in maybe 3 years. So there's no band left. So then it's just me saying yes, and then starting to get on the phone and calling people and getting other people to say yes, working out money and all that stuff, and then getting people on board, getting in the tunes. And then it's like, okay, cool. We're going to do one rehearsal. And then the next morning we're flying to the Bahamas and we're doing this show on rental gear, and then we're flying home.
So it's more like business as opposed to music.
Yeah.
Sheer
it's
music.
Always me and her management people, like the last few times her management people and I have had, you know, we've emailed back and forth more about logistics and money and this and that. And it's like, it's more fun when you're touring and you're in the groove.
Sure.
And you have your gear there. You know, I was playing my old 64 Deluxe Reverb and all my good stuff, you know. And then now it's like, okay, well, rent me some Hot Rod DeVille's, and I got to get one guitar and a flight case, and we got to fly to Vancouver, and I hope it makes it there. And then we got to make something out of nothing in about 3 hours and then go about our way, you know?
Yeah.
And we've had some great shows that way. And I've always been proud of my, so far ability to get killer players. You know, I've got, and luckily she understands that since we don't play but a few times, you know, a year for that sort of thing, it's not really a tour. It's just one-offs, as they call it.
Yeah, totally.
That she knows that the money's got to be able to cover that. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's got to be a substantial chunk to make all that happen in for like a week every 6 months.
Yep.
So it's enough money that I can throw it at, you know, serious session players who will come do it.
And,
you know?
but
so that's neat. So
it's just amazing that you've been there that long. I mean, that is really, it's not very common, as you know.
Yeah, that was a tour. That was in 2008, was the last Jewel tour, band tour where we were out. We did like 4 or 5 months with Brad Paisley, her and Brad Paisley, doing all these sheds. And like, we did that, you know, arenas too. I remember being awestruck on that tour because we did that arena at the University of Florida where they filmed the Tom Petty 40th anniversary concert.
Oh, that's a big, you played the stadium there?
Yeah, it wasn't the stadium. It's like a indoor arena at the college.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't been there.
But I just remember, but it was more not because it was big. I've done a lot of big shows that don't matter, but this was like, I'm looking around and the seats are the same. It's the same. It's this, you know, all the same built railing and seats as that 40th anniversary Petty concert that I've stared at 400 times, you know, because you know, and that was cool. But, you know, I liked it. That was a good time for sure. And now I still love her and I like doing the gig a lot, but it's just different. It's like, hey, we're going to do something in a month. Can you get everybody together? Get me what they need to rent. And we're flying here and we're going to show up and throw and go. And then we're going to take off the next day and fly back home. Man,
I totally get it. It's a business. It's more business oriented and not that the gig is not fun, but it's not the camaraderie and the the consistency. And I know you like being on the road. So I totally
it's cool that I've been able to, there's the modicum of camaraderie that's there is because everybody's cool and I've been able to hire friends, you know. I got, you know, in April we did a couple of nights at the Wynn in Vegas, full band, and I got Stanton on board, who's, like I said, has been one of my best buddies since I was 19.
Sure.
And I didn't just hire him because he's my friend. He's one of my favorite guitar players and he can stand up to any gig, you know.
Great player, man.
Yeah. And so I got him on board, and then, you know, I got Nick Buda, who's a drummer, big time session, you know, drummer, just a great player and guy that I've known forever. He played a lot of the early Taylor Swift records and stuff like that before she did her pop switch. But anyway, heavy duty guys. Steve Mackey, one of the best session bass players in Nashville, period, who I've known. He played in my dad's band when I was probably in the 8th grade, you know, guys. So it's been pretty cool. And then I would also mention Chris Tuttle, who was her keyboard player, who he's also been with her. He started the same day I did. And he truly is one of my best friends. He's a complete nut. Like, he is like the Kramer of my life, but he can play the shit out of the piano. Almost like, I don't know how he plays so well, because he almost doesn't seem like he can focus on it. And then he sits down and he just goes, but she loves him and she loves how nutty he is too. And he's been with her. He started the same day I did, because when the guitar player got fired, the keyboard player that had done all those rehearsals with her kind of got spooked that it was going to be a weird gig or something. And he saw an out and he quit that day that the guy got fired. So so Ethan actually called me and Tuttle, who really hadn't had a gig before. And we met in the parking lot that day. And I thought, this guy's kind of a nut. I don't know if I can be on the road with this guy. And he's been literally like a guy I talk to about every 3 days for the last 10 years.
It's funny how that works out sometimes, man.
Yeah, but there's great guys now, but yeah, it's just a different thing. It's more like, as they say in here, like around town anyway, it's all throw and go stuff. So it's always fighting rental amps and all that sort of thing.
How about you've worked with some really cool artists, and I want to ask you about a few of them. If you could talk about how you got the gig and, you know, an interesting or funny story about working with them.
Yeah.
Shooter Jennings, who I love his music. Yeah, man. Shooter actually started. Shooter thing happened for me before the Jewel thing. Shooter was my interim deal between the Shadazy thing kind of going the way of the dinosaur, and then the Jewel thing coming out of the blue. And it was the same kind of thing, man. I got on the phone one day and had a voice, you know, it saw a voicemail, and it was Shooter, who I knew of just because, you know, I knew, obviously everybody knows a Waylon, and my dad was friends with Waylon and stuff. And so I called him back and he said, man, because we're on the middle, they were doing an intense tour, like rock club tour,
had a van, or not a van, had a bus and a trailer. He was doing well at the time, but it was like we did cool. It was a cool rock club tour, and because he was always sort of the outlaw from the normal Nashville touring. But they were out like extensively, and they had a band. Like their records were the band. They were in on it all together. And Dave Cobb, who now is like massive super producer for Stapleton and Sturgill Simpson and Rival Sons and all this stuff. He kind of started. He was Shooter's buddy, and he kind of did his first production doing those Shooter records, kind of the prototypes of what he now does with all these hit guys now. Anyway, the dude that was in the band forever that came up with Shooter, it just kind of reached a point where they couldn't work together anymore.
That's weird how that happens. Just like, I guess it's like any relationship, it has a beginning and an ending sometimes. Not many relationships.
Yeah. And I know the dude, we're friends. He lives here. He lives in town, plays all over town. He still plays on a ton of the records Dave produces, but it was just a personality thing. It was like the band and him there was just a lot of fighting. And so anyway, they're on this, they're doing this intense tour, which always leads to personality rubs anyway. The more you're gone, the more when you got somebody that kind of like just nags at you a little bit, is okay, when you can go home, but when you can only go 45 feet away from them at most, magnifying glass comes out,
I totally get it.
So anyway, they were on this intense tour leading up to a record release show up in the Bowery and Ballroom in New York. And it literally reached a thing where they couldn't go any further. So they had to let him go with a month of shows left. And they were scrambling. Like he was like, they were already on the tour.
Right.
Like, what are we going to do? And truthfully, I don't know who recommended me. I think Audley Freed probably. I'm pretty sure he was one of them, because he's become a really good buddy, mentor of mine too. And we're in a band together. And anyway, but back then I didn't know him as well, but Shooter called and left me this voicemail and said, man, I need a guitar player like yesterday. And everybody I've called has said you. He said, I've called 4, 5, 6 people and everybody said you're the guy.
That's gotta feel good when
it did. Yeah. It did. And it felt really good. And I think he said Ollie, because I remember thinking, oh man, this is a hero of mine that's recommending me for a gig. This is like an unreal. A dude that I, sat in the lawn seats at the shed here to see the Black Crows, see him with the Crows when I was in high school. Anyway, so Shooter said, well, we're coming through Nashville. Like they were in the Southeast on the tour, part of the tour. He goes, here's the songs. It was like, 16, 18 songs. He goes, we can rehearse, get your shit together. We're going to rehearse at Soundcheck, which is the big rehearsal place here. That's also famous for the place that got flooded in the 2010 flood. Everybody lost all their gear.
Sure.
That was where we did the rehearsal. Ironically, in the same room that I did the first Shadazy rehearsal when I was green and never done a pro gig, I walked into that same room, and I've done 100 rehearsals in that room since. But anyway, cool. Showed up. It was a whole nother world from like what I was used to with Shadazy. They were great players, so that was the same. But it was like there was all these. It was a rock and roll outlaw world. There was people all around that looked like. I was like, man, are these bikers? Are they work for Shooter? Are they friends that was showing up to bring him an engraved revolver and like all this stuff? And I was like, man, this is awesome. I love being here. And we rehearsed for like 3 hours, and they're like, okay, we'll get on the bus. We're leaving. And the show was the next day. It was literally like they just happened to be able to route it through Nashville to get my stuff on the trailer and to rehearse for a couple hours, and I was gone. And we did, that was in 2007, I think. Yeah. And we did like 20, it was a month in November, and we did like 28 shows in 31 days or something like that. It was insane.
Oh my God. Was Ted Russell?
Yeah.
Ted, I got Ted coming on the show in a month or so. Yeah.
And, well, tell him I said hi. I haven't seen him in a while. Ted's still a buddy of mine. Gary did a show. Somebody he was playing with did a show with Gary out in Oregon a while back, and he was on the bus, and we were reminiscing. I love Ted.
Very cool.
I think Ted's playing with Shooter again, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he is. That's why I asked if he was back.
Yeah, and it was Ted and a drummer named Brian Keeling, kind of like Tommy Lee Jr., but with Shooter. And it's Shooter, me, and then there was a guy they had hired who basically, because they were sort of in survival mode and they wanted to really kill it at their release show. There's a dude named Robbie Turner who's a kind of a legendary steel player. He played in Waylon's band for a long time.
Oh wow.
He's one of the heavy guys. And he, as like a favor to Jesse, Shooter's mom, he was like, I'm going to go out finish this run with them, because they were worried about having this new guitar player, this kid they didn't know.
Yes.
So he was like, well, I'll go out too as a favor to Jesse. He's like, I'll go out. I'll make sure this is where it needs to be up until doing that Bowery show, the record release show, and then I'll go back home. He's mainly sessions now. And that was the band. And Robbie is still one of the funniest guys and a ton of great stories, and stuff. But it was me and him and Ted, the drummer, and Shooter. And we were gone. Like I said, I think it was 27 or 28 shows in that month. It was just...
That's massive. I was like... Intense, man.
Yeah, I just told my parents and my girlfriend at the time. I was like, well, I'll be back, in a month or so. So we did like all those shows. We barely had a day off, and I loved every second of it. And I still love when once in a while we'll squeeze Gary's gig into a rock club. And it's like, I feel like I'm at home. I'm like, every time I think about, or we'll end up at some town, some civic center arena thing. And there'll be a club there like Bloomington, Indiana or something. I'll go, well, that's that club I played with Shooter. And I still look back on that as fond as anything. And so we did that. I did that, finished that month out, took the holiday off. And then in January, we went and did a ton of TV shows to promote that record. We did not a ton. We did Letterman, which is the only time I've done that, which was really an honor.
Did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy that?
Oh, I did love that one, because just being such a fan of Letterman's and Sid McGuinness, the guitar player has been there forever. And obviously Will Lee and that whole band. I mean, stupid. Anton Fig. I mean, I got to play with him for like 2 seconds and it was an honor, but yeah, it was fun. It was a little, there's always a little bit of the only moment I ever have a slight choke up about doing anything related to playing in music. I've done shows at the sold out, CMA Fest shows at the Titan Stadium, 70,000 people. I don't care about that. It doesn't bother me. But knowing that it's live and knowing that you got one shot, I guess Letterman wasn't live, but
but it's going on TV, man. It's
going on TV.
Yeah, it's different.
And you got rental amps, which are always, that's like the hindrance of the guitar player is their rental amplifier.
Mm. Was it freezing on that show? Everybody I've talked to who went on there said it's ice cold.
48 degrees on the thermostat. Yeah. It was January, so it was cold outside too.
Yeah, but usually you have heat inside.
Yeah, but I'll say this. So this song we did, it was called This Old Wheel. It had a big gang chorus on it. Mm-hmm. And gang vocal chorus, I should say. And so Paul Schaefer shows up at our rehearsal because he had heard the song and he said, hey, we want to do the gang vocals with you guys. So he shows up to rehearse with us to make sure it's all arranged the way he wants it. He's obviously that's his forte. And he's wearing one of those like parka jackets with the fur hood. And I'm thinking, man, it's because it's January in New York. It's snow. It's cold as and he never takes it off. And I realized this is his daily thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they explain. And somebody mentioned how cold it was, and somebody that worked there, a PA or something, just said, yeah, well, he liked it at 48 on the thermostat because he never wanted to have us beat a sweat under the hot lights. So it was perfect for him under the lights. It just kind of everybody else had to sort of deal with it during the day.
Yeah. That's what I've
but that was an honor, and it was actually kind of a funny side note. We did that, so they had to do that gang vocal thing. So you know how during the commercials of those shows, the band plays through for the audience?
Sure.
Well, Sid, I can't think of the other guitar player, the woman with the dreads. Sid.
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of her
name. Yeah. Will Lee and Schaefer, they have to get repositioned over on the mics on our little part of the set to do the gang vocals. So they start the commercial break playing as a band "Love Is Strong" by the Stones, mm-hmm. and they get off their instruments to reposition during commercials, and I'm standing there ready to go, like slightly nervous or whatever. And the producer of the show, or the director, whatever, he's got his lavalier mic on. He goes, "Do you know this song?" And I was, "Of course, it's the Stones." And so I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Play it." because there was no guitar anymore. So for like the commercial break, I'm sitting there playing Love Is Strong with Anton Fig.
Oh, that's great, man.
I was like, this is the coolest. Like it was like nobody saw it. It wasn't recorded. There's no proof of it. But I have the feeling I have from it. I was like, that's like an honor. I mean, that guy's legendary drummer, you know.
Did you, was that your first time in New York?
No, I would go to New York a bunch, man. My brothers lived there. I have a brother who's 10 years older than me.
Okay.
Half brother. But I always just say brother. My mom, you know, had custody, you know, like my half brother and sister lived with us.
Sure.
But when my brother got out of college, he immediately moved to New York, probably like 94. And he's been there ever since. And now both my brothers live there. And so I've actually been coming and going from New York, since 1994. So I guess I was 11.
That's cool.
So I love the city. And I was just talking with my younger brother, full brother, who's an amazing musician yesterday. I'm going to fly up there in a couple of weeks and, bum around with him. They both live on the Lower East Side, and it's kind of our hood. I like that we always hang out in, and I love it up there, man.
Well, dude, if you want some places to go, let me know before you go. I'll give you a list. You can. I grew up there, man, and we go back there, and it's like when you know where to go, you don't have to pay $50 for breakfast. It's a pretty cool place.
Yeah. Oh, the thing I had to figure out on Lower East Side when I first started hanging with my younger brother there, I was like, all these hip places are cash now. They're like, the cool thing is to do no cards.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I'm guilty of never having cash in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to realize, I was like, all right, I got to go with cash on me because all the cool places are too cool for cards now.
Yeah, it's not that they're too cool. They don't want to pay taxes because it's so expensive there. Because you got to, they pay. It's not just federal tax. You have state and local tax on top of it. So it's it's this very high tax rate. So it's like, hey man, they want to get cash, so you don't. Maybe they're not recording most of that. I mean, I'm not like an accountant up there or anything, but I would.
There's a bar that my brother and I like, and on the Lower East Side, they're called 2 Bits, which it's a they have all the 80s arcade games and few pinballs, and it's a couple slices of cheap pizza and beer. It's not nothing fancy, but they have it down because we go there and play some arcade games. Pinball. My brother and I grew up loving pinball, so we go play pinball over there.
Yeah, it's great.
And have a beer, and then like. This place has it down because it's cash only, and then they have it, but right next to the pinball machines is your ATM. So it's they're making that $3.50 service charge every 5 minutes too. Absolutely,
man. That's the way they do it. It's the ultimate hustle up there, man.
Exactly. But I love New York, man. Gone ever since I was a kid. Like I said, because of my brother. I miss 48th Street. I hate that that's a ghost town.
Yeah.
I miss going into all those places. I'll still walk over to Rudy's, now that he's down in Chelsea or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's a few places, Ludlow over on the lower side, and I like Main Drag over in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, but it's not what, I just miss the old days when there was both sides of the street were lined with guitar stores. Same as LA. I've been going to LA since I was a kid and I love it there too. And that block with the Guitar Center block now where they used to have Voltage guitars and We Buy guitars and all those places. I can't remember the names. And now it's basically Guitar Center, Sam Ash, and then the Mesa Boogie Hollywood store, and that's it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of places to buy guitars, and even the ones like the few that are around, you go in there. There's not like Ludlow. This is not a big selection there. I mean,
no, it's more like those joints are more like if you want to find like a good maybe like an old MXR Phase 90 or something, you'll find one. Or whatever.
Yes. It's almost like I hate to say this, but it's almost like people get rid of their junk and sell it in there. It's not a lot of good guitars, and it was just disappointing.
Man, this place I've been wanting to go for years that I see their auctions all the time on eBay, and they have great shit. It's called Music Zoo, but it's out in I want to say it's like Roslyn.
It's in Long Island, yeah. It's somewhere in Long Island. Yeah, they have.
I love that place. Every time I look at their inventory, I'm like, man, they got all the shit I want.
Huge, yeah.
And the guy, I've seen a lot of the videos, and the dude that owns it seems cool, and they have a lot of like, I'm a big '80s metal, lover, and so like he's a big Charvel guy, and they've got all the cool stuff and a lot of gear that I want to check out. But it's just like, man, when I'm there, I'm kind of parachuting in for a few days to hang with my brother, and it's a commitment to get out there,
No, it's a 3/4 of a day because you got to hop on the Long Island Railroad, take it all out there, then go find the place, and then go. It's not fun in the middle of your vacation.
No, that's been I've been wanting to do it. I haven't gotten up the nerve to do it yet, but I'm a big fan of that place though, because every time if I see something cool listed on eBay, like some cool guitar, every time I click on it, it's inevitably the Music Zoo.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. I feel the same way, and I've had the same thought process when I go up there. It's like, I'm not going all the way out to Long Island. Yeah. Fuck that.
And I'm not the kind of guy. I've bought so many guitars over the years that I've learned a lesson on buying a guitar. Like, I'll buy a pedal or amp without playing it, but man, a guitar, I cannot do it without playing it first.
I agree with you, because I've gotten burned. Not burned, but you just don't know what you're getting, and it's got to feel. It's like I always say, guitar's like a woman that has to feel a certain way for you to get along with it, or whatever your flavor of, partner is, it's, you got to have a certain vibe with it. Man. So I agree. Yeah.
You can have a connection with an amp that you love. And I've got some shit that I love, but it's not the same way. It's not in your hand. Correct.
I agree. Hey, talk about the Gene Simmons gig. How'd you get that one? And God, you got to have a story or two that's funny about that.
Man. Yeah, that was great. I love doing it. I loved every second of it, to be honest with you. That came through some friends of mine. So he has a set, or he started, I guess, maybe whenever that was, 2 years ago, doing these Gene solo shows. And he, through a guy here in town, who's also named Ryan, they put together this band, and it turns out it's all these guys in Nashville that I'm friends with. They have a deal here called the Rock and Roll Residency.
Yeah, it's Phil, right?
Phil
Schaus. Yeah.
He's the one that I'm closest with.
Yeah. Phil
Schaus and Jeremy Asbrock, who they're like the, Terror Twins, blonde twins on rock guitar. And they've been the go-to guys for like rock cover band things for a long time. And they do that residency thing where they play all that stuff, and they're massive Kiss guys. They even do a show every year in December called Kissmas, where
charity, right? If I remember,
it's a charity. To get in, you have to bring. It's a canned food drive.
Yeah,
and it's at the Exit Inn, which is a legendary rock club here. And my buddy Chris Williams is the drummer. He's the drummer for Accept now, and these guys are just like massive Kiss guys, and they do the full makeup and everything. I mean, they do the firework smoking guitar, and they do the whole bit, man. They put everything into it. And they're like the Kiss guys the most aficionado Kiss loving guys I've ever met. And so anyway, so it sort of fell into place that my buddy Ryan, who sings and plays sort of third rhythm guitar with Gene, sort of band leads, if you will, he put that band together. And they've had a couple different drummers too, but Jeremy couldn't do all the shows on that first 6 or 8 months of them doing Gene stuff. And so they just thought, who's the other rock guy? And, they called me. So I sort of found myself, I was playing with Gary already, but luckily we had a month off, and I just delved in and learned, 20 Gene songs. And before I knew it,
you're playing with Gene Simmons.
Yeah. And Phil was going to drive to the first gig. He got a rental car, like a Suburban. And so Phil and I were buddies for sure. Like, we were friendly, and I knew him and he knew me. But man, we got in that. The other guys flew in, but Phil and I got in a Suburban and drove ourselves to Kansas.
How far?
I don't know what it was. It seemed, but the point, I guess what I'm getting at is I couldn't say how long it was, because realized that we're like brothers from another mother, that whole cliche.
Yeah.
And it could have been an 8-hour drive or 10, or I don't know what it was, but I turned around and we were in Kansas, and we've been chatting. Phil's also like a massive Van Halen guy, and that's sort of my area, my love of Van Halen. And Phil is the only guy that kind of knows all the shit that I do. And he even had a cover band called Dan Halen where they dressed up and did the whole thing. And so I realized then that like we really were two sides of the same coin. And we talked the whole way there, like, middle school kids. And all of a sudden we got there, and then Gene shows up, and we did the gig, and it was great. And Gene, there's a lot of mixed stories about him out there, but I only have my personal experience, and he was absolutely as nice and as gracious to the band as anybody I've ever worked for.
Yeah, well, Phil seems real happy with him, and I think he treats them all right. And
oh yeah, man, he does. But I mean, and that's literally for Phil and Jeremy and all those guys that are doing it, and Ryan too, that it's literally like, it's that movie Rockstar, when they pull the kid out of the crowd, it's Miles Kennedy, but he, but they pull him out of the crowd and they go, "You're the singer of the band now." And he was the kid in the cover band, that was what it was, man. Those dudes were, I like Kiss, but I wasn't. I mean, they are the diehards. They are the wearing the makeup, playing the tennis racket or whatever when you're kids, all the way to now. They know everything about it. So there's not a better group of guys in the world to do that gig. I mean, and they're great players. And so they let me come in and do my thing. Obviously Gene wants the stuff like the record, which those records are so iconic.
Yeah.
Whether you like them or not, Kiss has the Kiss Army and then a lot of detractors, but whether you like them or not, man, those records are kind of perfect the way they are. So we were even learning the kind of wonky stuff off of Live, the wonky, and I did my best. It's the most I've ever tried to learn the record because I'm not known for that. And I usually tell people no, not to call me for that. But with Kiss, it's another story, like you have to do it. You have to do the ace solo. It's whether it's what you would rather do or not, it almost doesn't matter. Man, that stuff's it's too iconic to mess with. The
Eagles are the same way. When you have stuff that is that are hits like that, that's what people want to hear and see,
Exactly. We got guys. I'm on stage with Gene and I'm looking down. There's dudes in the front row dressed as the Demon. There's all those people. You can't let those people down, man. If anything, those are the most diehard fans in probably rock and roll history. You can't let those people down. So I did my best, and I don't think I let anybody down. And Gene was as cool and gracious. Like I said, any of the negative stuff I've heard about him, I didn't witness for a second. He came in. He didn't rehearse with us. We rehearsed here at a little hole in the wall place in East Nashville, where Jeremy and I live. And he came in and played bass and sang the Gene stuff, and me and Phil played guitars, and we ran through everything. And I kind of had everything sort of already really pretty strongly memorized. Phil told me like he broke up the harmonies already. Like, you're going to play this one, you're going to play that one, and so I had everything down, and we blew through a rehearsal, and then Gene showed up like an hour or two before we played. Came in our trailer and just said, "Hey, let's make sure a couple things." And he's like, "No, you're going to have this riff with me on this whatever song." And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do this." And he went, and after about 5 minutes, maybe 10, he knew that I had everything exactly the way he wanted it.
Cool.
And then we stopped. All he did was he put the bass down. They brought in catering and we weren't eating, cause he was still there. We're kind of trying to, be with the boss or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, sure.
He goes, "Guys," he goes, "just eat. Just don't mind. Pretend I'm not here. Eat. Get your, whatever." And he sat there and we ate dinner, and he sat there and just told stories, and like cool stories, man, like about when him and Paul were, broke, and Paul was a cab driver and stuff like that. And Gene, I guess, he was a teacher or whatever, and told stories about, like, I can't think of the song right now, but he was telling songs, like riffs of songs, going, "Well, I just got this is actually the Love and Spoonful. This is a take on a riff from Love and Spoonful that we sped up and turned around." And he actually got the bass and was showing me the original song riff. "See, this is what the song I loved, and then this is what I wrote." And he was actually showing me where they got the riffs from, where he got them from, morphed them from other music that he loved.
That's amazing that he still remembers that. I mean, he's got a massive catalog, and this is,
exactly
40 years ago.
Exactly. I wish I could remember some of the songs it was. I mean, he was talking about maybe Watching You and some other stuff, and just like, "Oh yeah, I got this from that, and this is sort of a sped up version of this and that, and I changed, and he was playing it for us, just telling the coolest stories, man. It was really great. But he was an example of, I think the Kiss thing is such big business and really his business.
Of course.
That this thing was so fun for him, and there's no like strings to it, really, no strings attached, just like play wherever he wants with a bunch of people with fans. There's no weight of Kiss on it.
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, he's just having so much fun that all he wanted to do was tell jokes and tell stories. He hung around the band the whole time. He wasn't like, "I'm the artist, leave me alone." He was just like genuinely happy to be there and genuinely happy that we were there.
Well, he tours with that thing a lot. They're always on the road. So like whenever he's one of these guys that strikes me as he cannot not work. for probably a bunch of reasons, but they're touring constantly when,
they're in Australia right now and they're playing with Ace. Now the guys are playing with Ace and Gene.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I think he did it tentatively, just seeing how it would go, toe in the water kind of thing, and realized how good they were, how good the response was. And then that's it. We're going to do this as much as we can. Because there's, like I said, there's just none of that extra excess weight of the Kiss thing attached to it. He's it's just having fun doing covers. I didn't do any covers with him, but they've done some Chuck Berry. Actually, you know what? We did Chuck Berry because we played in St. Louis like the day or two after Chuck died.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, I love Chuck Berry. So we played a Chuck Berry tune, and it was really awesome, man. Like I said, anytime I hear anybody say anything negative about him, I just go, man, that was completely non-existent. I mean, wholly non-existent when I was there.
That's great.
Yeah. But I wish I could remember, more of the actual stories he told. But just the whole vibe was so great that it just was a genuine pleasure to be there.
Talk about, this is the one your dad was always bragging on about you, your Chris Cornell.
Yeah, that was cool too. That was a whole nother situation from the Gene thing. It actually happened like a month after the Gene shows. So I just got a call out of the blue from this guy. His name's Trey Call. He runs the House of Cash studio for John Carter Cash, which, for the people that don't know, House of Cash is Johnny Cash's studio that he built up in Hendersonville, which is kind of one county outside of Nashville up on the lake. Johnny bought all this land to ride four-wheelers and hunt on and stuff, and it had a little cabin. And he started recording there, and they turned it into the place where he did all the stuff at the last period of his career. And after, John Carter Cash, his son, is a producer, and it's a great studio. There's when I went there to do that, it was my first time, and other players that had been there before had gotten there early just to hang out because it was such a heavy, in a good way, it was such a, you're out in the country and you're on the front porch of this log cabin and you're at Johnny Cash's place. So there's a real something there. Anyway, so Trey runs this place, and through Jeff's Jeff had built Trey a telly, actually the same color as the telly I have. We have matching guitars, but I'd never met him.
Everything is so I don't mean this in a bad way, but incestuous in a sense. Everybody, it's just amazing how small the guitar community is. Once you're in there, everybody knows everybody else.
Yeah, it's true, man.
Yeah. And
so Trey, I didn't know him, but literally the same telly that Jeff made me as Sonic Blue, he made Trey the matching guitar. And so anyway, John Carter had pulled out all these notebooks of Johnny Cash's. He found them, and I think he'd written a lot of his, it was all poem and all poetry stuff. And he'd written a lot of this stuff back in the 70s, and it got tucked away and forgot about. Well, John Carter pulled out these poems that Johnny had written in the early 70s and decided to make a record out of it. And his idea was to give each poem, and not everything was finished, but give a page out of the notebook to different artists and have them finish the song.
Oh, okay.
And so it's this double album that's out now. It's really cool. There's a lot of great people. Willie Nelson and Christopherson, and Jewel did one. I didn't play on that, ironically. Cornell. And Cornell's is kind of the centerpiece one. I think it would have been anyway, but it most certainly was because he died.
Yeah.
But Brad Paisley did one. I'm trying to think of who else. I had to go pull it out of I bought the limited edition white vinyl of it. I've got it in my collection over here. But anyway, Cornell finished this song, and obviously I'm a huge fan of his from being a kid in the early 90s,
Sure.
He's the voice of that decade to me.
Yeah.
Loved his solo records too, Euphoria Morning and stuff. But anyway, big fan.
Solo records are phenomenal.
Just a huge fan. Remember Soundgarden was on the radio all the time when I was in middle school on the rock station that doesn't exist here anymore.
I was going to say, what is that? The radio.
Back in the day, yeah. Back in the day, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a bumper sticker for 103 KDF. And the KDF building's still here. Now it's like apartment and stuff, but I would probably pay $50 if I could find one of those bumper stickers. But anyway, that's where I heard all that stuff when I was a kid, that and the Cult and all the rock stuff of the era. Anyway, so Cornell was going to play guitar because he's actually, really cool guitar player. He doesn't,
I saw him in concert. He's just a very talented musician overall, man.
Exactly. So, but he tore his rotator cuff.
Oh.
And so they got the session on the books for what they're kind of thinking is going to be the centerpiece song of the record. And Cornell's coming in for it and everything, obviously he's coming in to do it. All the record was done at House of Cash. And so he's coming in and he's got torn rotator cuffs, so he can't play. And so Trey starts calling around, and they don't want to just go to the fastball session guys that work all the time, because he's like, man, we want a rock guy that's going to play we don't want a guy that's going to come in and read a chart and play the way a session Nashville slick session player would. They're like, we want a guy that knows the genre, and we don't want to just get a guy that's just going to read the chart. So anyway, Trey starts calling around, and he thinks to call Jeff's in because he knows a lot of people. Jeff works on guitars he doesn't just build guitars, but he's like kind of the best for setting up guitars. He's sort of hard to get in with because he doesn't do it. You kind of have to know a guy that knows a guy. But anyway, Trey called him, and Jeff, who's always looked out for me, like massively, like in non-musical ways too, like him and his wife have looked out for me, since 2003, like I'm their kid. And so Jeff told me, he said, no, it's Ryan. He's the guy. He's session guy, like that level of playing of a session player, but he doesn't just, it's not a slick whatever he goes. He's a rock guy. I mean, he has all the Soundgarden catalog and he knows all that shit. So Trey got in touch with me out of the blue. Hey, I didn't know him. Hey, this is Trey Call from Jeff's, and told me the rundown. Can you come in and play with Cornell and play acoustic? And of course, my jaw's on the floor. And I was like, what, when and where?
Yeah, of course.
So I showed up. I was a little nervous because he's just such a huge star, and I mean icon in the truest sense of the word of rock and roll.
Totally get it.
And so I wasn't nervous, but I had a couple like moments driving up to Hendersonville. It's like a 30-minute drive out there. And then I walk in the room, and I end up I know a couple of the other guys in the session, which of course were like the top of the top, like the drummer of drummers, Greg Morrow, who's played on a bazillion records, but he's also the nicest guy in the world. And as soon as I saw Greg, I felt like good about my life again. I was like, oh my God, not only is he a friend, I know there's nothing can go wrong with Greg in the room. Right. I knew I was okay. I'm good. He's here. I'm good. And, so they played the song down, and it's great. I'm like, the demo is as good as it's Cornell, and the guitar has a couple of those, what I would consider like what I would call Soundgarden sounding chords changes in it.
Yeah.
And so one of the other guys in the session who was writing the chart was almost kind of streamlining that out of it. Like, well, we could do it a little differently.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. And I really don't know. But it was just like not quite the same as a demo. And I kind of went with it for a second, like, all right, well, then I went, and then John Carter said something. He goes, man, look, let's make sure you got that change right. Like the demo. And so Chris goes, well, I can't really play, but I'll show you the fingering. So I'm sitting there. There's a picture of it somewhere where I'm sitting on the couch, and he's got the guitar, and he's not really moving his right hand because he's got the torque rotator problem. But he's showing me the chord. Like, he goes, I don't know what you call this. I don't know music really, but this is what I do. And he showed me his left hand. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, by God, if that's the way Chris Cornell does it, that's the way I was going to do it to the end of time.
Dude, do you have that picture? Because I'll use that for when I post your interview on one, like probably on my website or something like that.
I think I have it. I know Trey has it, but I may. But I just remember going, I'm sitting here, and he's showing me how to play it, like the way he's showing me the quote unquote, like I said, let my layman's term, the Soundgarden way to do it.
That's so cool.
And I was like, well, hell yeah. So I did it. So we cut that. So it was just like, all right, well, let's go track it. So we went and set up, and I was tracked acoustic on it, and it wasn't an overdub heavy session. It was, we're going to get a pass. Mm-hmm. And then but we're getting a band take. It's not a piecemeal, Pro Toolsy thing. So, actually borrowed a couple really great sounding vintage acoustics because I'm more of an electric guy. I don't have anything that I would consider like studio quality acoustic. So I borrowed an old 40s J45 from my friend Ryan, which is the sound of the record.
Mm-hmm.
It's his guitar with these. Diodario makes these like half flat wound strings, and they have this really nice thud to them. And that guitar with those strings is the sound of that record. And then I did a little double pass later on with I borrowed my dad's, it's like a 60s Martin D28 or something, D35. And anyway, so we go to cut the track, and I'm kind of just back into work mode, and I'm sort of forgetting that it's Cornell. I'm just like, I got to remember the song, and let's make a good pass here. And I didn't really think they didn't really stop to think that he was going to sing along with us. It's not stupid to say that out loud now because I just wasn't paying attention. I was just, all right, what am I going to do? I got to make everybody happy. John Carter has a cool production style where he sits out in the live room with the band. He was sitting 2 feet from me with a clipboard staring at me.
That's kind of pressure.
Yeah, it was. And Cornell's in the booth, and it's like, oh, and the song, I don't know if you heard it or not, but it's like, there's nothing in the song but acoustic guitar and his voice until the second verse. And even then it's real kind of gothic and dark. Everything sort of files in slowly, and the drums, there's no drums other than mallet work, and it's an upright bass, and it's real. There's nothing to hide behind, and there's certainly nothing to hide behind until the second verse. And so we go to cut the very first pass. It's like, all right, everybody get your headphones on, let's do it. And I start the song, and when his voice comes in on the intro, and I think everybody in the room would tell you the exact same story. I don't think this is an embellishment. His voice came through the headphones, and my right hand stuttered and stopped because I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm hearing him in my head, and he's singing in the other side of that wall. And it was a true hair standing up on your arm moment, as much as I've ever had to hear that voice. You know what I mean?
I totally get it because his music was so embedded in your DNA. I 100% get that.
Yeah. And so I stuttered, and John Carter stopped the session. He said, "Hey, hold on, everybody. Let's start over. You got this, Ryan. You make sure you got." I said, yeah, I'm good. And we blew through one more take and possibly a third, but there was no more. We didn't play more than 3 takes on that. And it was the second or third we kept.
How long before he passed?
Well, it was a long time. It was a year.
Okay.
And what it was John Carter sent out, the poems to everybody or whatever to say, hey, finish the song. But, he didn't give anybody a deadline, and everybody works at their own pace. Well, Cornell's was done, and who knows who else, was even, ready to cut there. So the record was like done. This was like May of 2016. And, the record only came out 6 months ago.
Sure.
Or less, maybe. I don't know. Probably 6 months ago. Anyway, so he died in May 17, and we did it in May of 16, I believe. You can fact check me, but I think that's what it was. Hmm. And I never heard anything about it again. I never heard it until they released the single a few months ago. And I just thought to myself, I left there. We did like a second, maybe a third take. Everything was keeper. Everybody, the rest of the guys started packing up and leaving. And they said, stick around. So I stuck around and played. They were like, well, just to have the other sound, like grab that Martin and double yourself. So I doubled that pass in a take. Mm-hmm. Chris Scruggs, who's an insanely good musician, more in the country and bluegrass world, he's kind of the foremost non-pedal steel player, like Hank Williams era steel, like lap steel, yep. but real period traditional, like he would be the guy. If you wanted to make a Hank Williams record, he's the guy. And he played this beautiful lap steel solo. And while he was doing a take on the lap steel, I got out my old deluxe reverb, the same amp that toured with Jewel. And it's this 59 Strat that I have that I got off my uncle. And I set up like a ton of reverb and delay and fuzz, like a real gnarly fuzz. And one of those prescription experience pedals, but that's all a weird tie-dyed looking pedal. And anyway, I got this monster, like echoey, nasty fuzz thing and just put it in as like weird color things. I wasn't even really playing notes. It was just this weird, spooky pass of that. Did a pass of that while Scruggs did a pass of steel. He nailed the solo right, basically right away. I don't think he played it once. And then it was like 2:00, and I'm like, okay, we're good. We'd started at noon. It was like, okay, we're good. And Cornell only had a day, so I was packing up. Chris packed up. I was packing up, and shaking hands with Trey, Call, and Chuck, who was the engineer out there, shaking their hands, and like Chris was in the booth ready to cut the vocal. It was done, and I was done, and he, and I don't know how many takes he did because I left, but you can only assume it wasn't many because he was just so good.
What's the name of that single? Because I want to listen to it. I'm sure people listening want to hear it.
It's called. It's the line, and it's "You don't know me, I don't even know myself." And I'm not sure exactly if it's which part of that's the title, but it's something along the lines of the record's called Johnny Cash Forever Words, but Cornell's track is called, I think it's I Don't Even Know Myself, or You Never Really Knew Me. It's one of the two. I have to pull it out of my vinyl stash here to look for sure. But that's the song, and I'm really proud of that. And I thought, I didn't know what they'd keep. Obviously, they had to keep the acoustic because that's driving the song. I didn't know if they were going to keep the weird fuzz pass. And man, they liked it a lot. Left a bunch of it kind of in a spooky background way in the mix, and super proud. Like, I would love that song if I didn't play on it. I've never been one of those ones that I play on stuff I want to listen back. I just kind of like, whatever. But that's one I'll listen to and go, you know what, man, I just like hearing him sing on it. And because it's sort of got a dirge, spooky, like I said, vibe to that song, because of the subject matter, it sort of turned out, it came out not long after he died. It almost turned out into his sort of his last track, the posthumous, kind of like the David Bowie Black Star thing.
Yeah. Have you been able to, I don't use the word leverage in this case, because that's a pretty significant, track, being a Johnny Cash, being Chris Cornell. Has that gotten you other work?
I don't know if it's specifically that song has, but but the people, because the people that already call me, would hear that and go, well, of course we already call him. We already like him.
Okay.
So I don't know if specifically that song has, but it's definitely a point of pride for me. I'm not, like I said, not the day in and day out session guy that does all the 10 to 6 demo world, because I purposely don't.
Yeah.
Luckily, when I do get on a session, it's something like that, and it has a lot of weight to it, and I feel good that I kind of can be that guy that sort of sneaks in and does a lot of the cool stuff.
Well, you're doing what you like, which is really nice, and I think being the rock guy in a town where there really isn't a lot of rock. I mean, there's got to be more, but
there's guys that own rock records, but there's not rock guys in their blood, Yeah.
And being that guy, I think, is probably a bit of a differential for you, which works out in your favor. And especially you've been around now a bit. So
yeah, I feel like I'm kind of a guy that sometimes it's for better or worse, but like I do what I do. Like I said, I'm not that, like, people don't call me to play the same thing every night. They don't call me to learn the record specifically. I did the Gene thing because, like I said, explain that. But everybody that's called me because I've had a reputation of being good enough to do the gig, but kind of just have the tone that I have, that, that I always make sure to be appropriate with tone, but kind of do my thing and play the way I play. I'm not a guy that's just going to come in and play up the middle enough to sort of do everything. Like, I feel like people call me, they go, well, he's good at this, or he sounds like this, and he's the right guy for it. Not, we're going to get this guy because he's a good session guy and can play everything and kind of just sort of cop things.
Yeah. No, which is great, man. Mm-hmm. People call you for what you do, as not opposed to, what you can do, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's a point of pride for me. I mean, I definitely see guys that can kind of just sort of, there's guys that are chameleons, and there's also guys that really good at playing sessions because they never get in the way. And I don't know if that's a good thing. Like, I like that I make a statement, and there's chameleon guys that that are great players, but there's also guys that are good because it's almost like it's generic enough, Yeah.
Well, I think it's I don't think it's good or bad. It's what you do. And there's a need for that. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. I'd like to say it's not good or bad. Once in a while, I think I'm horrible, but
I think everybody goes through that.
Yeah. Yeah. But somebody one of the other days said, I forget, I met somebody on the road and they said they were a big Gary fan. They'd been to a lot of shows and they go, you in the show, in the crowd, like we can tell that you think you're good. And I'm like, well, then you don't really know me that well. Cause it was just somebody I met, like take a photo in the parking lot with them anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, trust me. I was like, if you knew me, then you would not be saying that. I was like, nobody hates my playing more than I do.
Yeah. That's kind of weird that most people are like that.
Yeah. It's like, you can tell you think you're good. And I was like, yeah, well, you can tell we've never met.
Hey, question for you. You might, if you're comfortable answering it, if you're not, that's totally cool.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously growing up being Steve Wariner's kid, there were some advantages musically and business wise as far as getting the door open perhaps. But I also know that just from being in business and life, getting the door open and keeping the door open are like completely mutually exclusive of one another. Someone might help you get a door open, but keeping it open is on you 100%.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you can discuss some of the advantages and possibly maybe the disadvantages of having Steve as your dad.
Yeah. That's not, I could do that. Ironically, man, all the gig things, I mean, every gig I've done, he hasn't had anything to do with.
Right. I haven't heard you mention his name once.
It's not, it was the thing that was the best thing about it was not having the last name is having the blood. Being from that family, like my dad is like every Wariner male, and my cousin was a guitar player too, but so female as well. But like every male on my dad's side of the family plays guitar. Some are, CGP world class, and some are horrible, but everybody plays. My cousins who I grew up were like my best friends, always had bands. I'd go up and jam with my cousins, band playing, Clapton tunes at the VFW and stuff like that. And everybody played. So that and my granddad, up until he had too many strokes to play anymore, he still taught in his 70s, taught like 25, 30 students a week, beginner guitar.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So having the blood is, I'm more thankful of that than having the name. I have had a few people say some cross words to me about it. Like I had a real backhanded compliment once from somebody that said they saw some video I did playing guitar and they said, man, you're pretty good. And I was like, oh, well, thanks, man. They go, I just thought you were kind of bullshit and didn't really play good because your dad's Steve Wariner. You got everything.
Oh my God. That is so fucking, that's so fucking rude.
I know. And it's like, and I let it roll, and I'm not a confrontational person.
Well, you're not going to accomplish anything by dealing with that.
No.
I mean, there's nothing to be gained by coming back with something on that guy.
Yeah. He was like, well, but you sounded really good in the video. Like you do your own thing. I was like, thanks, man. Anyway, I'll be over here now.
Yeah.
Talking to you.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
That's so rude.
Yeah. But
that's just somebody who's like angry or something like that.
Yeah. I had to, honestly, the cool thing about it was, like I said, none of the gigs have come from that. It's always, McNally got me that first gig, and I really think everything came from showing up. The door he opened that door to the Shadazy thing, showing up and killing, and like showing up and like being
killing it. It's okay to say that, man. Showing up and giving 110%, and it worked, and they felt the vibe.
And that that was just a snowball thing, and it started. That was the snowball. The cool thing about my dad being around him was being around guitars forever. Like. When I became obsessed with Stevie Ray Vaughan, I got the Texas Flood cassette when I was probably in 5th grade. And I started reading everything about Stevie Ray Vaughan. And he was like, oh, yeah, 61 Strat. It's like, oh, there's one of those over there in the closet. So
yeah,
I'm like,
I would imagine.
Play along with Texas Flood, and I've got a 61 Strat on my hands, And it's like, so I'm lucky to be around guitars. Like I said, I have a 59 Maple Neck Strat that I love dearly. I grew up playing it. It was my uncle's. And, he played in my dad's band, and he turned me on to a lot of records. Yeah,
your dad's brother. He mentioned that. I remember he talked a lot about his brother when I interviewed him a ton. They had a great relationship.
Yeah, he still plays with them they played from time to time, and he's a great player. He turned me on to a lot of stuff. He turned me on to the, just a lot of music I love. I used to spend time with him, and we'd drive around in his truck listening to David Lee Roth, or he turned me on to Toto. Rosanna was on the radio and he was like, wait to this end solo. You're going to love this. And this is Steve Lukather, blah, blah, blah. And then, all that stuff came from him. And then anyway, I ended up, growing up. He showed me how to play, Lights by Journey on that guitar. And now I'm using it on this Cornell session,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
nice.
play it all the time. We cut a bunch of stuff with Gary last week at Jay Joyce's studio with Jay producing, and I had that Strat with me. And it's like, man, I learned Lights on that guitar when I was, 12 or whatever.
That's nice.
So that's the cool Wariner thing to me, is being around the players, and being around the gear, because I'm obsessed with gear. I have been since day one. But that's the main thing. I've never really gotten a gig out of it. And maybe I've gotten people go, well, that's cool that Steve Warner's son, he's probably good because of it. I think they maybe assume I'm good because I'm related to him.
Yeah, that's probably a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, but as far as the work thing, it's never come through that.
Good for you, man.
I'll tell you what was cool though is like when I was a kid playing guitar and obsessed with Van Halen and whatnot. There's a shop here in town that's been open since the 70s called Corner Music.
Oh yeah, they just moved, didn't they?
Yeah, they're about to.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of a shame because that building, they've been in the same place since. That's where I got my first guitar. We picked up my first guitar there, my first, Japanese Fender Strat. And I used to go, like my parents would take me there to look at guitars on the weekends. And then when I got my license, I'd drive there. And this dude named Todd who works there, he's been there for 20 years pretty much. He's real recognizable around Nashville because he's got this crazy hair and he's got all these braids in his hair. He looks, I see people point and laugh at him from time to time, but he kind of he does his own thing. And I love that about him. And he's turned me on to a lot of records and as well, like he was a big one along with my uncle and some other people. But he, back to my point though, like I'd go in there, my mom would maybe drop me off on the weekend, Saturday when she'd go somewhere. And I'm a 13, 14-year-old kid with no money. But they were a dealer for Ernie Ball and they had the Van Halen guitars there. And I wanted one of those, man. I used to throw pennies in the wishing fountain, to get those guitars.
Yeah.
When they came out, when I was like 8. And anyway, but they had the Van Halen and Steve Lukather Music Mans in there. And I used to go in and I'd ask Todd, hey, can you get that down and let me play it? And he'd plug me into an amp in the little amp room. And I would just blow through bad versions of my Van Halen licks. And but I think because of the association of my dad, is where I'm going with this. I think he was like, well, it's okay. I don't think he'd let other kids sit there for 2 hours and play through a $2,500 guitar that they can't. He knows I have no money. I haven't had a job. Didn't have a job. I'm a kid. But I think that was one thing I think was good that my dad, he knew my dad. So he knew we'll let him do this. So, so I got to hang out in music stores and not get run off,
Man, that's not I wouldn't look at that as nepotism.
No.
He's just knowing that if something happens, your dad would be responsible to take care of it is probably what it was,
Yeah.
And that because you were growing up around this, probably the chances of something happening aren't very high,
Yeah. And Todd was and he was cool too. Instead of kid, you're killing me. He's a massive Van Halen guy. And so he would go, oh, hey, do you know this lick? And he would sit down and show me stuff.
That's great.
So I never took lessons, but for briefly, when I was real young, and I begged my mom let me quit because.
Oh, you're self-taught?
Yeah,
that's very cool.
I don't, and if you're in the studio with me, you'll understand. You'll get it because I can't. I mean, I can read a chart okay, but I can't read music, and I'm kind of. I've got a lot of friends that know that I go to so what is that chord actually? I'll know what I'm playing. I know how to play it, but to me, it's I don't know what it is, and but I took lessons for a minute. I begged my mom to let me take lessons, and then a couple months in, I begged her to let me quit because the guy was mad that I wouldn't read Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and play the melody.
Okay.
Because I would do it. He would always play it first. And so I would just do it by ear and play it back right.
Right.
And he would go, and he literally, I remember my last lesson when I begged after my mom finally let me quit, he let out this huge sigh, he's like, man, he goes, well, we should be on page 18, but we're going back to page 10 because you're not doing your homework. I was like, but I played it.
God.
He goes, well, you played it, but you weren't looking at the book. You just played it right. And I was like, man, all I want to do is play like Eric Clapton and learn how to play, Black Dog. Let me, can I just do that? And he didn't want to do that. So I begged my mom to let me quit. And I just wore out the motors on Sony cassette decks after that.
Yeah, that's.
And then, yeah, but I had my uncle showed me stuff, and then my dad once in a while. But he actually kind of left me alone because he could tell I wanted to be left alone. because all I cared about was rock music, and he really didn't know anything about that. He showed me a few things. My first thing on guitar was Beat It. He showed me how to play the riff to Beat It, which was Lukather. I later found out.
I think that was. I used to think it was Lukather. It was.
Well, he played the riff.
Okay, yeah, but the solo was
solo's Eddie.
Yes, the solo is Eddie.
Solo's Eddie, and I think Lukather might have been a little chuffed that it wasn't. I think he wanted to play the solo, but they're like, we want a big rock solo, but they wanted the biggest guy in the world at the time. And,
and that was Eddie. And then Jennifer did Jennifer Batten I interviewed her. She did I've always had such great respect for her as a guitar player. I think she's phenomenal, man.
There's another guy along the way that showed me tons, showed me the most stuff, and really was the closest thing to a real teacher or guitar playing mentor I had was this guy named Andy Gurley. He was a teacher here in town. He doesn't live in Nashville anymore, but he was a teacher and he taught lessons at the store that I worked at. But he was like my bro. He was a GIT guy, and he was friends with Jennifer Batten from GIT.
Okay.
But he could play with Steve Morse and all this stuff that I still to this day wish I could play. And he would show me. He was the one that showed me stuff. He's also the guy that when I got that Shadazy gig and I didn't know I was green, all I'd done is the traveling van and trailer. He's the guy that wrote. He took all the songs and wrote me charts like Nashville charts and showed me how to read them and all.
Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, he's done as much for me as anybody, and he lives in Cincinnati now, and he still plays, but yeah, and he didn't try to get me to take lessons. He liked that I played the way I played, and he just tried to give me some tools when I would listen,
That's great, man.
Yeah, and he would do stuff like he wrote the chart for me, and he would go there'd be multiple guitars on the track, and I would be not sure what to learn, and he'd go, I think you should do the one. He's like, if it was me, I'd learn the part that's in the middle of the neck. He goes, play the 5 to 10 fret part. Or on this song, I'd probably play that one down in the open position. I'd learn that guitar part. He taught me about how to pick out the right part when you're trying to do one guitar when there's a bunch of tracks.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk.
I lost track of what I was saying. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I want to talk about gear for a few minutes.
Yeah,
I know you're a gearhead, man. What is your go-to guitar right now, and what other 2 or 3 round out your top?
Man, I'm one of those guys that's everything. One of my mottos for everything for any situation is everything has its time and place, and that goes for anything. I think, that whole bit $100 steak is just as good as a ballpark hot dog.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
In the right scenario, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything has its time and place. Is all
sure.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so, but I definitely equate that to gear. Depends on the gig. With Gary, I'm playing. It's a lot of Strat and Telly. I'm playing a lot of traditional country stuff. And I have a Zemaitis that I play a slide on, like a Ron Wood model Zemaitis that I play some slide on. Because I'm a massive Stones freak, so I had to have one of those. But I'm known as a Les Paul guy, a lot because the rock Les Paul thing. Mm-hmm. And with Gretchen Wilson, I didn't do anything but play Les Paul and Marshalls. Known as a Les Paul Marshall guy. Then with Gary, I'm playing either a Fender or a Matchless with a Telly. Jeff Sin made Telly or Strat, and so I just kind of go with what the right gig is. And, if I'm sitting around here or somebody calls me, I've been doing these hard rock sessions for Yamaha Corp.
Oh, sure.
Like playing all the bed music for their dirt bike demo videos and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they want hard rock guitar. So I've got this guitar I put together that's a, Charvel clone Floyd Rose thing. I kind of modeled it after this guitar Steve Stevens had, because I'm a massive Steve Stevens fan.
Cool.
And back to the Michael Jackson thing, and his Dirty Diana thing is one hell of a guitar track. It just depends on what it is, last week I was in the studio and didn't know what was coming down my way on that Jay Joyce, Gary Allan session thing. So I had my Les Paul, I had my favorite Telly, I had that 59 Strat. I always bring that Strat to studio because where'd you get the 59 Strat? That was the one from my uncle I was talking about.
Great.
And he played it. It's the only guitar he played on the road. He bought it in '84 and used it on every show my dad did for probably the next 15 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he bought it at the same store in Austin where Stevie Ray bought his Strat. Like my uncle and dad would go down there in the 80s and buy up all these Fenders, and basically between them and Stevie Ray and Jimmy, they were the guys that were buying all the vintage Fenders that came in there.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
How does it, I've never played a Strat that old. What is it? How does it feel different from a new Strat?
Well, it's home. It feels like home for me because I've had it for so long. This guitar, I have to show you a picture of it, man. It's every bit. It's verging on the Stevie Ray Vaughan level of wear.
That's fantastic.
So it's so worn in that it's a maple neck Strat. It's one of the last maple neck Strats made because it's a March of '59. It's right around the time they were switching. And but it's so worn in. There's no lacquer left on the neck anywhere. Just a little bit on the front of the headstock. But I mean, it's got so much finger gunk and oil rubbed in over the years that it looks like, if you're not paying attention, it almost looks like a rosewood board. It's so worn. I'm
assuming it's been refretted.
It refretted at some point, but I haven't had it refretted since I've had it.
Okay.
But it's original except for the frets and the pick guard.
Wow.
And I have the original pick guard, but it's in like 3 pieces. It just like disintegrated. So I put a repro guard on it, but it's got those. It just sounds great. It's got those really like those 50s Strats, man. Really had these great sounding weak pickups. Like they say, it sounds great because it's really weak. Like if you played a new Strat next to it, if you just A/B'd them side by side, like it's going to sound way lower output. But when you get that all boosted up and with the right tone, it's way more open sounding when you get there.
Most guys I speak to prefer the older pickups because they're not as hot.
Yeah, exactly. Same. And there's a lot of great people out there making pickups that are mimicking that. But there's something I've sort of, it's not totally proven. It's more of, I guess it's my sort of gut theory about it is my dad has this old 1950 Fender Nocaster, the actual like Nocaster where they clipped off the logo. And it needed the pickup rewound. And so Jason Lawler rewound it. I sent it out to Lawler and had it rewound. And the thing came back sounding amazing. And the thing for me, I think is a big part of it is I don't think it's the wire itself because you can get the wire, but I think it's the magnets aging is this. I think that's in my unproven theory. Like I'm no, I don't know anything about magnets and aging, and I'm not a scientist, but my gut is the magnet aging that is more important than anything on those old pickups.
Yeah, well, it's something because people seem to love them.
Yeah, and you can't really – that's something I don't think you can replicate because that old pickup sounded just like – it's real close to Mike Campbell's old broadcaster in age, that Nocaster I rewound. And when that pickup came back, it still had that – it really sounds like Mike Campbell's guitar, that particular one of his old – tellies that he has. And I think it's like, man, but it's those magnets, I think, is a lot of it because it's brand new wire. Or the wire now is probably 10 years old, but at the time it was brand new and it still sounded like a killer old pickup.
So, okay. So 59 anyway, Strat, what's your number one Les Paul?
I've got a Les Paul that is kind of magic. I hate to say that. Everybody says theirs is the best, but I searched around for obviously I couldn't afford a real 59 Les Paul, but I played a bunch of old Les Pauls in my day being around people that have them. And I had a benchmark in my head and I basically bought and traded around like custom shop 59 reissue Les Pauls for the better part of a decade. And I kept trying to re-up and get better. And I finally found one not long after Carter Vintage Guitars opened here in town on 8th Ave. Mm-hmm. Which is like my favorite place for vintage guitars. They have a great
selection, man. That's the standard of guitar stores.
It is, yeah. And they had this 59 reissue, one of those. There's a series that Gibson does called Collector's Choice, and they take like a guitar, like they basically take a real vintage Les Paul that whatever owner has, and they do like a run of 200 of them or whatever. Mine is a Collector's Choice number. I forget what number it is, but it's the Ed King from Skinner who just died last week.
Oh, yeah.
R.I.P. Which ironically, he's known as a Strat guy. He's the Sweet Home Alabama and worked for the He's the guy that put all the Strat tracks on the classic Skinner stuff, first 2 records, who I grew up emulating, the Skinner guys, But he had a Les Paul, or a couple actually, but they did one of his, and with the whole wear aging where they age them like his and stuff. truthfully, it was kind of ugly. Like, I don't like the finish of it, but the guitar was so damn good that it didn't matter. And so I was like, this is it. And Christy and Walter Carter worked me like a stupid deal on it. And I couldn't pass it up. They really did me right by that guitar. And,
so it's a 59 custom reissue.
Yeah, exactly. Custom shop reissue, but it's like a flame top standard, I actually had it refinished. The top, it's such a good guitar. It was, when I got it, I was like, this is the best Les Paul. I mean, it's better than some of the 58s and 59s that I played, because let's be honest, just because it was made in the 50s doesn't mean it's good.
No, not at all. It's like anything else. You have good, any time period, some things are good, some things are bad. That's
exactly. And I've been upstairs at Gruen enough at the high dollar room since I was a kid. The first time I went up there was with my dad and Larry Carlton. And I was like, and we went to lunch, me and Travis Carlton, his son, and we were around the same age. He's like a year older than me. It was like me and Travis Carlton and riding in my dad's backseat of my dad's truck with Larry Carlton in the passenger seat, going to Gruen. And I've gotten to play all these 58, 9, 60 Les Pauls that have come through there, and there's a lot of clunky ones. And this one, man, so this one truly is like better than a pretty large number of vintage ones I played. It's just it's just the right tree and the right day and all that. It sustains like incredibly long. It's got the Spinal Tap sustain.
Is it heavy? It's not chambered.
No, it's not chambered, but it's just it's like in the low 8 pounds. I've never measured it.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
It's probably it's between 8 and 8.5, I guess. I've never measured it, but I got a friend who measures every guitar he gets, and I've never, as long as it felt good to me, I've never wanted, never cared to know the exact number. But it was so good. I got it. And after a couple of years, the finish on it, really just the look of the finish, it's accurate to the one they're copying, but it's just not my cup of tea. So I had the guy refinish it, and now it's got the finish, looks just like the finish. I had to mimic the top on Billy Gibbons' Pearly Gates.
Very cool.
So it looks like Pearly Gates.
And the thing about guitars is, like, even the one that you think, the 59 that was crap, another guy can come in right behind you and that'll be the same. He'll feel or she'll feel the same way about that guitar as you feel about the one you have.
Oh, exactly.
It's just so personal and so, it's like I said, like a friend or a partner. There's got to be a certain thing that it has, and that thing is obviously very different from everybody.
Oh, definitely. Everybody's looking for the same thing, or different things. Excuse me, not the same thing, but different things. But it seems like the consensus around here is anybody that's come across this Les Paul's kind of had a little bit of a jewel factor on it.
So you got
can get there. They can get good. Like Jeff Sin, I used to always say, like Gibson, a lot of the Gibsons make a really good starting place, but then you got to maybe change the bridge and put different pickups and kind of take it there. This one was like out of the gate was just so good. All I did was swap pickups and put my preferred set in. But to be honest with you, I didn't need to. It was out the door, straight to a gig. Amazing, from the day I got it.
And it's got the PAF clones, I guess.
It's got the PAF clones. I've kind of been into these PAF type pickups for a long time. A lot of guys in town like them. It's made by a guy out in the sticks in Tennessee. It's called Tom Holmes pickups.
I haven't heard of those. The ones that a lot of people like are Ox.
Yeah, the Ox. Carter sells the Ox. I've heard those on a few guitars, and I had a set of Ox and a guitar that I played with Gene. I played the Ox on the Gene gig.
How did they sound? What did you think of them?
They're great. The Ox is probably a little more. They were probably a little more PAF accurate, and the Tom Holmes are PAF based, but they kind of have their own thing. I actually like their thing the best. They're a little punchier, but they're not too hot. Tom Holmes worked at. He was the guitar repair guy at at Gruen back in the 70s, and he actually built a lot of the early Hamers or some of the early Hamers, and built a lot of custom guitars for Billy Gibbons in the early 80 period, around the 81 El Loco tour and stuff. A lot of funky guitars for Billy, and Gibson hired him in the early 90s with another dude he created the 57 Classic.
Oh, I love those pickups.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite of the new, because I had burst puckers and I love the 57s much better.
Yeah,
really.
57s have a little more. They don't have as much bite. They're a little.
They're warmer. They're thicker, warmer.
Exactly.
I love them.
Well, the Holmes is basically he has this crazy facility out in his barn out in Jolton, Tennessee. It's probably half an hour outside of town. It's way out in the country though, and he he like basically does everything to the nth degree. So it's like kind of like the Cadillac 57 Classic is sort of what the Tom Holmes is. It's like, because Gibson, has to do certain things for production purposes, but this is like the handmade Cadillac version of the Tom Holmes thing. They're really hard to come by. There's a long waiting list because it's just him. So it's kind of part of that downside of the guitar gear world where it's like things become sort of unobtainium, and then you got to wait in line and pay for it and all that sort of thing. So
that's a good thing for the guys.
It's a good thing for him. Yeah. And he doesn't, and he's so old school that literally he just has a phone number. You call and you put an order in with his wife, and
that's funny.
They'll say, well, we'll call you back in about 4 months when yours is ready. For a while there, he got really, really hot in Japan, where the Japanese wanted his pickups a lot, and they got so back ordered. He was like 2 years out. And so then people started reselling the sets for $1,000 a set or $800 a set or whatever. And then he flew to Japan, and basically there's like a Japanese made Tom Holmes now only for the Japanese market.
That's smart.
But now he's back to just doing stuff. So his wait list is down, but it's $550 a set, worth every penny, and you got to wait a while.
Let me ask you a question on those Oxes, because I'm really tempted to try one. But they're expensive too. They're like $400, $450.
Exactly.
Carter sells a few different ones. They sell like the Dwayne Allman. They sell just the PAF. They sell Freddie King, and there's a fourth one. What is? Have you? I mean, like, how are obviously you think, well, the Freddie King sound like Freddie King, but they're all supposed to be PAFs.
Yeah.
So I'm,
I've spent a lot of time dissecting that myself, because Mark Stowe, I believe, is the guy that makes Ox 4. He's
in the UK, I think.
He's in Oxford in the UK, I think.
Yes.
But his site doesn't have a lot of – it's like humbucker, and then there's like a pull-down menu with a few different magnet choices.
Yeah.
So what I think Carter's kind of their go-to – they were the only dealer for a long time. I don't know if they still are, but they've done a lot of sets. So they have a lot of nomenclature there that you don't see on his site, because I think they call and basically have him make sets based on guitars they have there. Or one of their repair guys, Gary Bohannon, who's a big nut on old PAFs. I think he's kind of like custom ordered stuff, and they've gotten their own like sets made. Like there's a set called the Carter 64 and it's basically a patent number short leg mounting based on a 64 335 they had, and they just Gary took the guitar in the back and measured out the pickups and said, hey, Mark, make these. And then that became the Carter 64 set. I think it's kind of that kind of thing. He also has a Jimmy Page set.
Yes.
The best I can tell on Jimmy Page set, it's all kind of it's just like, Page is kind of known. I think it's kind of an Alnico 5 magnet deal is the way I understand it. And I think all that the Page set really is if you had gone on his website and ordered the Alnico 5 humbucker set, but with a black bridge pickup uncovered.
That's okay.
And then that's the Page set. I think they're kind of putting names on stuff that on the site is just pull down menu options, And I think, Freddie King would have played the one that had Alnico 2s. I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm just like, thinking that. So, and we'll do a Freddie King set, or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't, man. I wouldn't buy open. I would buy a pickup, the ones with the covers, man. I don't like open pickups on my guitars. It's just a weird preference. I guess everybody has their own.
Yeah, I like. It depends on the look, man. Certain, like Slash's Les Pauls, who I love Slash, and his Les Pauls all look badass with no pick guard and open pickups. Mm-hmm. But the Jimmy Page fan in me doesn't. I don't want to do that on my guitars. I want the covers and the pick guard.
Yeah,
It's funny, man. It's like it's really aesthetic. And Jeff Sin, I maybe think about it too much, but Jeff Sin will call me a lot or send me photos of stuff he's working on and go, "What do you think about the looks about this?" Because I kind of have I feel like I maybe overly think about the aesthetic and what matches visually and stuff. And he always asks me for my opinions on that. Does this look right with this and that sort of thing? But I think it's just all about matching. But an uncovered with the pick guard, I would never do personally. I like them. I like the covers and the pick guard on my Les Pauls.
Yeah, I do too. I have a classic that has a pick guard but no covers, and I mean it's not bad, but I wish I had covers on them.
If you put covers on that, it looked like a totally different guitar.
I know. I think that's the one I'm thinking about getting the the Aux 4, but I have this classic is really hot pickups. It's like the hottest, the 490 and the 498.
Yeah, I think the classic has a 500T in the bridge, which is even hotter.
Or maybe that's it. Maybe it's
I think it's the 498 and the 500T.
Yeah.
It's 16, 17K ceramic magnet deal.
Yeah, they're really hot, so it's kind of nice for that. So then that's how I rationalize myself to get another one. And
I like the Aux 4 a lot. I have that one set.
Which one did you get? Set. Which one?
Well, when I got mine, it was literally like a few days after I bought that Les Paul, and I wanted to try him because Gary over at Carter had raved about him to me, and it was so early on in the inception of the Aux 4 company, there just was a set.
Okay.
So it was just at the time it was just an Aux 4 humbucker set. So I don't know what the only thing I could pick from at that time was what cover bobbins were underneath the covers.
Man,
and I didn't care at the time. I was going to leave the covers on anyway. So I just got an Aux 4 humbucker set and left them in the guitar for a while. That was kind of around the time the Tom Holmes thing was really out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then
okay, and then when you got your Holmes, you swapped them out. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. The Holmes actually popped up on Craigslist for a decent used price, and so I bought those. And honestly, this is kind of nerdy, but the reason why I put the Aux 4s back in on the Gene Simmons gig was purely aesthetic. The underneath those Aux 4s were double cream.
Oh yeah,
and that's such an Ace Frehley look that Jeff Sin and I were joking about it at lunch one day or on the phone. I talked to him on the phone probably every day. And I was like, dude, is it crazy that I want to take these pickups and take the covers off and have the double cream, no pick guard Ace Frehley look? And he's like, no, let's do it. Because it'd be almost like it'd be a gas just to show up and do that. It's like just to kind of mime the Ace thing. So I did it just for those G gigs and then put the Holmes back in when I was done with it.
Oh my God. But you just gave me an idea. When I'm ready to buy these, I'm just going to call Gary and tell him, here's what I'm looking for. This is the sound I want. This is the guitar I have.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah, tell me which ones to buy. That's exactly
what I would do. He's been through so many old Gibsons and PAFs that he's played more than most people ever will.
That's pretty cool. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, totally.
Music, Desert Island Discs.
Ooh,
3. No particular order. 3? Just for now. Yeah, man. That's all you get is 3.
Well, I'm the guy that likes the stuff I like so much that I'm gonna like load the deck and do double albums.
You're gonna get box sets, right?
I was gonna say Desert Island, man. I'm going double albums just to get as many tracks as I can.
There you go.
I'm gonna answer like knee jerk. If you ask me this in 10 minutes, it could be different. But right now, knee jerk is Exile on Main Street.
Great record.
Physical Graffiti. So I got Zeppelin, so I got double album on Zeppelin. And that's got the biggest breadth of their, it's got all the acoustic stuff and it's got Kashmir and it's got the rock and roll stuff. And then probably Van Halen, probably Fair Warning. That's probably what I would say, those 3. For now, that's my answer.
That's it, man. That's just for now. Tomorrow they could change.
Of course, Fair Warning is against my ethos. That album's short as hell, but it's so good. It's just Eddie. I'm stunned, the entire time.
I like Exile, but I prefer with the zipper.
Oh, Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers, yeah. Yeah.
I almost think of those. They're so that little period, that 71 and Sticky Fingers and 72 is Exile. That little period is so important for music, rock and roll, and the Stones that I almost consider them it's like a triple album. Like Sticky, obviously I won't lump it in for my answer, but to me, Sticky Fingers and Exile are like their companion pieces.
Well, you had Mick Taylor at his absolute best, and I think it was just wonderful. I mean, I've listened to tons of his solo stuff, and I hate to say disappointed, but it wasn't as good as his stuff with the Stones. I mean, I think he's one of the most brilliant blues rock guitarists ever.
100%. If you ever haven't heard it, that John Mayall on the Blues Breakers record, Crusade. Because he's the guy, so, famously the Clapton Blues Breakers record. Then Peter Green did A Hard Road, and he became famous as replacing Clapton. Well, the third record in that run was Crusade, and it was Mick Taylor at 17. and it's unreal good. Chris Rodriguez, who's a great guitar player in town, he turned me on that record.
Yeah, I know Chris.
I'd obviously known the other ones, but he's like, dude, you never heard him on Crusade? So I bought the record, and he actually played it for me on a plane once. And so Mick Taylor is as good as anybody. If blues rock, classic rock guitar, he's as good as anybody ever was, and as underrated as anybody ever was. Even though he's in the biggest band in the world, he's still underrated. I bought one of those old Ampeg combo amps that he played just because of him.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the mail now. So the Beano one was Clapton, Blues Alone. The second one was Peter Green. And
Hard Road is what the second album is. Blues Alone may be a compilation or something.
Okay, yeah, or maybe I think that might be just him, because it's only a picture of him on the cover. I'm looking at it now.
The Mayall is a Hard Road. That's the one that he does Supernatural, which sets up basically the prototype for Santana's entire career. Right. He does the reverb drenched Les Paul thing, and it's a great record too.
Yeah, well, I'm interviewing another one of his guitarists, a guy named Rocky Athas. He's played with him.
Oh yeah, I've heard of Rocky. He's great, man.
Yeah, he's a real good guitarist. He's coming on the show soon as well.
Have you ever read that Stones book called Old God's Almost Dead? It's kind of the official. It's not an auto, but it's a biography on the Stones.
No, but I'm going to write it down.
Dude,
Old
God's Almost Dead. Must read. At the time I read it, it was when I was like peaked obsessed with Stones. I was buying, I had everything. I was, 19, 20 years old and obsessed. Anyway, in that book, they talked to Andy Johns, who produced and engineered a lot of that stuff. I mean, he did a lot of Zeppelin and the Stones, engineered all that. Most of his older brother Glenn did a lot of classic stuff, but Andy I actually prefer. But Andy did, most of that Mick Taylor era. He did the Van Halen record, the one with Right Now on it, called For Unlawful Chronology. He produced Free, which is another classic.
Oh my God, great band.
And Andy is talking in that book. I believe it's in that book, but they're talking about Mick Taylor, and Andy was like, man, he goes, I've worked with. He died a few years ago, but he's the guy that got the When the Levee Breaks drum sound and all that. He's this rock and roll legend. But he said in that, I think it's in that book, but he said in an interview, either way, that, between working with, Mick Taylor, Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, Paul Kossoff, Eddie Van Halen, all these guys, he said the guy that the one guy that he would listen to all day, every day and never get sick of and never think, oh, he's just whatever, is Mick Taylor. He said that was the guy he could listen to play all day. All these years later, he was the guy, the one of all of them.
Yeah, he's beautiful. I've actually tried to get him on the show, but he's not really accessible. And then from what I heard, you got to go through a lawyer. And then as soon as I heard that, I'm like, no.
Dude, beautiful is a great way to put it. Even
it really is.
Even the bluesy, even on the rock and bluesy stuff, it's real pretty. It's not like a gritty rough house sort of thing. Like Stevie Ray Vaughan was rough house, Like on I don't know if you like off the top of your head know the tune, but on Goat's Head Soup, there's a ballad called Winter.
I know it very well. I know that whole album. What a pretty song.
One of the most underrated albums of theirs. And that the lead playing on that, I mean, that's
Dancing with Mr. D.
No, that's the riff, man. That riff is the shit when it turns around, when the drums come in and stuff. It's so good. And Winter is like, and of course his lead playing with the phaser on Heartbreaker, doo-doo-doo and all that. Yeah. But that Winter, man, it's like, it's textbook. The tone is there, but the playing is so pretty and like emotive. It's textbook in my opinion.
And my favorite thing of his is the solo on Can't You Hear Me Knocking?
Oh yeah. That's
just amazing.
That track has fairy dust all over it.
Oh man!
Of course, that whole record, but that record, it's hard. It's hard. Like I said, it's almost companion pieces. That record's hard to. I mean, everything's perfect on Moonlight Mile is one of my favorite ballads of all time.
Great track, man.
He plays
Sister Morphine. I mean,
oh yeah. Of course, then you get into Ry Cooder, who I love. It has that weird skanky slide sound on that record, on that track.
Hey man, tell me something about yourself that people would either be surprised to hear or might find a little odd. Besides the fact that you listen to all that classic rock, which is 20 years behind you, which I think is awesome, of course.
Yeah, that one came off my mom. She had great taste. Like the ability came from my dad, but all my taste came from her. Like she bought me my first Van Halen tape. I didn't even know Van
You hear
Halen.
that, Steve?
She came home. It was like right when I got serious. It was like 92 or 93. I was 9. And I'd already been playing a little bit. She came home. I was obsessed with Eric Clapton. That's how I got started. It was obsession with him because I'd heard White Room and off of a CD she had, and I was obsessed. I was like, that was the lightning bolt moment. I was like, I have to play guitar like this for the rest of my life. And she came home one day from the store, and that Van Halen live album had just come out, probably on an end cap or something. And she, on a whim, bought it, the double cassette. And she's like, hey, I bought you something. I bought you this Van Halen. And she goes, I said, I don't know if you've heard of him or not. I'd seen him, in magazines. Or she goes, but if you haven't, she goes, if you like Eric Clapton, you're really going to like Van Halen. So I bought you this tape. And that's cool. Like, and then, the lightning, Zeus hits you with lightning again, Anyway, so that's where that came from. But the thing, the thing that people might find weird about me or things that they don't know, I mean, all my friends know this, but the thing that people, my friends don't know this, but I'm like a massive movie nerd.
Oh,
like
cool, man.
Yeah. My best friend growing up who lives in LA now and writes and directs, and he runs a TV network, actually, like literally everything on that network runs through him. But we would sit in class in middle school. We've been friends since middle school, and we'd sit around and talk about movies like I talk about gear with guitar players. I talk about movies with my buddies. And, one of the dudes in Gary's band is a big movie guy. We stay up watching movies till like 5 a.m. every night. But that's kind of my thing, man, away from guitar. It's like who was in what and, movie trivia and who was in that. That's my other love, to be honest with you. If I couldn't play guitar, I'd want to be in LA and figure out some way to work and then be a gaffer or something. I don't know.
That's great.
That's probably my other thing. People always go like the dudes in the band. The other day we had a night off in Eugene, Oregon, actually like 2 nights, and they wanted to go to this bar that was having trivia and have Gary and some of the other guys wanted to go have dinner and play trivia. And they were like, you have to come. They were like, there's going to be a movie category. It's like movie and music knowledge is kind of my, like music, of course, of the genre. I'm not saying I know every genre of movies and music, but of the stuff I'm into, I get way, way into like deeper than even necessary. And that's probably my other thing is the movie deal.
You're the guy, you're the lifeline, man. I'm glad I know that now.
Like I've got the buddy of mine here and lives in my neighborhood. He bartends at a bar that another friend owns, and he has a horror movie podcast. And one night I was sitting with him and we were talking about like Friday the 13th movies, and he was like, "Why do you know all this stuff about crappy 80s horror movies?" And I was like, "Because I watched them all when I was a kid." And so I've been recorded like three episodes as like the third guest guy on his horror movie podcast, where each episode was about a different Friday the 13th movie. That's
funny, man. That's like horror and crime are like 2 of the fastest growing categories in podcasts.
Really?
Yes.
Well, guys, and these 2 dudes are local comedians, so it's like it's real funny too. It's a lot of just the banter. And like basically like we watch the movie and then we just sit around we don't watch it during the podcast. We just get on and talk about it after we've watched it like earlier that day.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a lot of them joking around, and I'm just trying to keep up because they're actually like local, but still like local stand-up comedian dudes. And I like to think I'm funny, but
yeah, it's like someone like if I told you I'd like to think I play guitar, but if I hung out with you, I probably would. I feel you on that one, man.
Yeah, so that's probably it. That's it. Like the movie thing and that, you wouldn't expect to find me, I guess, on a podcast where all we do is joke around about Friday 13th movies.
No, I think I think it's so important to do non-music stuff to balance out. I think it's really healthy actually and really good for you.
Yeah, that's my thing. That, and like I told you earlier, you'll find me bicycling around my hood a lot. But that's really just so I can listen to music. I'll bike 15 to 20 miles and I'll always just have an album on in my ear. Like I've got friends that want to bike with me, and then I feel like I'm obligated to talk with them.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I can go by myself and listen to, put on a Dio record and go off on my own.
Yeah. Let's talk about good music. There you go.
I know, man.
Hey, what's the most important thing your dad taught you?
Oh man, he's taught, like I said, I didn't get a lot of guitar from him, but he's taught me all kinds of good shit along the way. he has this saying, that he says a lot. It's kind of like a little bit of a country, saying or whatever, but he always says you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. You never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. And he's like, man, stuff doesn't matter. You don't get too hung up on shit. Like,
man, that is awesome.
Yeah, he says that all the time when I was growing up. He's if he ended up tomorrow living back in the town he's from and worked at the high school as a janitor, he wouldn't give two shits.
You never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. I like that, man. I'm a firm believer in that. I have no attachment to material things at all. I mean, none. Even my guitars, I love them, but they're material. Yeah, I love. And I
don't always fight it, man. I get attached to stuff, man. If something happened to that Strat or my Les Paul, or I got a couple vintage Marshalls that are like family members. I'd sell my house before I sold a couple of these Marshalls, but so I don't always heed the advice as much as I should. But
that's okay.
I got that from him, he's really good about letting stuff roll off his back. When I was trying to explain to my mom that I didn't want to go to college and there wasn't a need for that, I just want to play guitar. She was cool with it because she obviously knew there was no chance I wasn't going to play guitar. But my dad was the one that would pull me aside and go, hey, just so you know, your mom's okay with it. We're not disappointed. He goes, I knew you weren't going to do anything but play guitar your whole life anyway. He's always nice. Everything's cool. He's cool with everything. But he just, that was the thing, one of the biggest lessons. He always, and then on the music standpoint, he always just he used to always tell me not to play at full volume at sound check so you don't get hindered by the sound guy later.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
He'd always be like, sound guys, I've told that to sound guys before and they hate it. But he's like, man, play on 7 so that when the show goes along and they're not putting you up enough, then you got gas left.
Yeah, very cool.
But yeah, honestly, it's the caring about the stuff that matters and not about stuff. That's his motto, I think. Yeah.
And you learn also when, as a parent raising kids, that like with the college thing, you really can't have expectations because it's just, when it comes down to it, it's their life and it's wrong. Outside of, you expect them to be good people and stuff, but whatever, your kids are going to do things that you probably make no sense to you or you wouldn't have done. And that's just totally fine. That's who they are and they got to learn. And you kind of learn that.
Yeah. But he wasn't a sit down a lot and give you a lesson kind of dad, or we got to talk about this. Obviously when I was younger, he was gone a massive amount of the time, but his thing was more like just, he's a lead by example person. And, I, again, don't always follow. I wish I could be as nice of a person as he is. Cause he genuinely, people always go, is your dad really that nice? I'm like, it's true. It takes me a little more to put the facade on sometimes.
Yeah, but you're younger too. You get it.
Yeah, he's just always been that way. So it's like he's definitely a lead by example guy. I try to. It doesn't always work.
And how about your mom? What's the most important thing you learned from her?
Well, obviously, besides all the music, she's like loves music but doesn't play anything. And her strengths all lie in business and no bullshit. She could be seen as harsh at times. I think maybe when I'm not acting like my dad, I'm acting like her, and it comes off a little harsh.
Gotcha.
It's not coming from a shitty place, but she's just like matter of fact, usually right, really strong gut reaction. But one of the things I learned from her, I guess one of her things she always said was, she's a big, not like in the way of frivolous spending, but her big thing was like, you get what you pay for. I learned like you do things right. Don't cheap out because you're going to pay them in the long run. That's her big thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I learned that from her, but obviously the biggest thing's the music, man. I mean, she like handed me stuff, handed me keys to a castle, like her favorite record of all time, 2 favorite records of all time, Allman Brothers at the Fillmore.
Oh, wow.
She's the one that turned me on to slide guitar and Dwayne Allman. She used to see the Allmans with Dwayne and stuff. And then she also, her other favorite's Hendrix Band of Gypsies. She used to drive us to school.
That's quite funny.
Drive me to like 3rd grade in a minivan playing Band of Gypsies.
That's great, man.
So like, obviously that's the most important thing I got from that.
Very cool, man.
But she's also like, she still advises me on shit to this day. Like, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? She's kind of like born and bred money management she managed my dad and stuff. So
that's great.
She's like, sometimes she'll tell me what I don't want to hear. she's really good at telling you what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it.
Yeah, man, that's a strength.
Yeah.
That's important.
So, I don't know. That's my answer there.
The last question is best advice you've ever been given and who gave it to you? And it might have been that thing you said with your dad already, so I don't know.
That's up there for sure. One sentence, like one piece of advice I can't think of. I guess I just picked so much up from watching people, the way they act. I don't want to get advice that way, you know?
Sure.
Anything stuff. What's that?
I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be like something someone said to you, but maybe your observation, something that you've noticed and you really turned you on, or.
Yeah. You know what? I'll tell you one thing that I learned from a drummer friend of mine. He was the drummer with Jewel, and she loved him to death. And he almost never went around her. He kind of kept to himself on the road and didn't speak up when he could have, but shouldn't have. And kind of keeping yourself and not getting too close to the fire. Because people that end up being the, BFFs with the artists can end up getting burned the most, you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know? And so it's like he would disappear and play on his practice pad at the top of the arena at the third level and go, oh, there's Larry up there. And but I always admired, I always thought that it was like, if you don't, kind of stay out of the way, do your thing. I'm out there to play guitar, and I'm not working for their management. I'm not making decisions for their career. I'm just trying to sound good and play good. And staying out of that line of fire, is always good. Not that I don't want to hang around the artists, because
I totally get it. You're not buddies. You're not friends. You're there to serve. You're performing a service for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Some people get really caught up in the gig, like it becomes part of them because it's their year of their life. Or guys that I've been with Gary, there's dudes in Gary's band that have been there 10 to 18 years, and I've been there 3. But It's like, try not to get caught up like it's not my life. It's his. It's a gig. It's my job.
Sure.
It's the business.
Yeah, and that's an important. I think it's a smart thing, because this way, if something does happen, you're always cognizant of that. Something can happen. So if something does go wrong, if you lose the gig or whatever, you've known that the whole time. You weren't suckered into, or you didn't mislead yourself into thinking this is, a relationship that's beyond business. You could be really good friends in business.
Dude, exactly. Yeah. I'll tell you something that Jeff said. Again, I've mentioned him 100 times, but this is something he told me right around when he was giving me some of the ropes, because before he started building guitars and doing strictly repairs, he was on the road as a guitar tech for years. And one thing he told me early on, when I was starting that Shadazy era and just getting my feet wet and all that, he said, and he's a pretty straightforward guy, and if the wrong person talks to him, they might think he sounds harsh, but he's kind of a Buffalo, New York sort of hard-nosed dude.
I was going to say, you're talking to somebody from the Bronx. It would be really tough for me to think somebody sounds harsh.
That's also where my mom gets that from, because her dad's from the Bronx.
Okay. I was thinking about that. I was like, God, did Steve hook up with a Yankee?
Yeah, my mom's dad was from the Bronx.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, that's how we roll.
That's exactly. See, there we go. I brought that all together. But Jeff told me and he's Buffalo, and he's kind of got that hard-nosed Buffalo blue-collar thing. And
mm-hmm.
He told me, he goes, this is actually something that he said. It actually was a piece of advice, not learning by example. He said, man, he goes, when you get going, if you're getting going in this, he said, 2 things. And this is the 2 things I probably live by still to this day, as far as road musician. He goes, always have an out, which other people call it other things. But to him, an out is any possible situation that could happen during a show, have in your mind already the fix for it. So if you do break a string, what are you going to do? If this does go down, where's your spare? Every situation, including not the playing part, but always have an out for every situation, is how he told me. And I still do that to this day.
I think that's very prudent advice.
Yeah. And then the other thing he told me, and this is kind of relates back to what we were saying, and this is the other thing he said, well, how did I put, give me a second. How did he put it? He goes, it's kind of related to that whole, it's show business, not show friends. He said that artists, and particularly artist management, and this is the truth. I've witnessed it many times over the years, especially management. They want to get you on their side because you're working for them. And they go, they always talk about, like, if the gig's going bad and you get called for something else, or the gig's going bad and you leave, he goes, don't, I'm not saying leave anybody hanging, but he always says artists and management always want to talk about loyalty. You're loyal to us, you're our guy. But if they want to make a change,
oh yeah,
give you 2 weeks for this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He goes, so if it's right for you, he goes, keep in mind, he goes, there's only loyalty only goes so far when it's a business arrangement.
Well, you got to have a career, man.
Yeah. But he's like, and he was like, because it was maybe some talking about maybe what if I take this gig and I'm going to have to leave and I got to leave right away. And it wasn't even a thing that ended up happening, but he goes, but I remember him telling me, he goes, are they going to give you 2 weeks notice when they want to fire you and hire somebody else? I was like, no.
Yeah. And you know what? The same way that the burden is on you to make sure, hey, this is a business relationship. So if I get dumped, I understand that. The same thing is the burden on them that this is a business relationship. And if therefore you want to leave, life is relationships are 2 ways. Mm-hmm. It's not one way and then the other way, but we expect this. No, that's not cool. You have to have mutual expectations. And if you don't, that's a personal issue that person has to deal with. It's not your problem,
Exactly. Like some gigs pay, Nashville touring world, some gigs pay salary, some gigs pay show pay, right?
Correct.
Well, you do a lot of gigs show pay and you might do 80 a year with them, but with a person, but if you got something else come up, and you're doing something else in the time and something comes up, you're like, hey man, I'm not on salary. I'm not on a retainer. Like,
right.
But a lot of times management in Nashville, they want to have it that way. Well, but you work for us. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not on retainer, Yeah. That's a business arrangement that we can talk about.
That's a dicey thing for someone to think you work for us because you're a subcontractor.
Yeah.
You're like an employee. Yeah. You work for them in the sense that you're an employee. You're getting paid to do a job, and employees leave jobs every day, man.
Yeah, I think the people that pay you W-2 and take out taxes on you, they think that obviously some gigs they do 1099 and you're really subcontract. But if you're on a W-2 gig and you played 100 shows with them last year, they just think you're their guy.
No, I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense.
But, I guess Jeff always just wanted me to, especially when I was 22 years old, just getting into this whole thing, like giving me – my mom and dad always have my back and are always great sounding boards, but he was helping too, like – making sure I knew how to take care of myself, and not get wrapped up in it just because I was a kid,
It's good for you, man.
Get steamrolled or whatever, however you want to put it.
Get your mom on him if someone steamrolls you, man. That's what
exactly.
Kick someone's ass.
I've had somebody when I was with Leann Rimes, and she had Mark Hartley was her manager at the time, who is the guy that managed his company, managed Toto to this day, and Steve Luger there, and put that from that band basically and he was like, hey, Mark Hartley, whatever. He goes, yeah, I know your mom. He goes, I'm going to make sure this and that because I know because she'll have my ass. I don't know. Because she's in the business, and so he's like, yeah, I worked with her. I know not to mess with you. I was like, hey, whatever.
Good for her.
Yeah,
nice work, Mrs. Wariner.
Yeah, right.
Hey, dude. I really enjoy this. Let me tell people where to find you, and thank you so much for your time, man. This is cool. Let me tell people where to find you, Ryan, and thanks so much for your time. Check out Ryan Wariner online, and he's currently touring out with Gary Allan, so if you want to go out and support them, that would be really cool, and tell him you heard the show and you dug it. Let me just spell his last name. It's Wariner, Wariner. His first name is Ryan, and you can also find him on Instagram at Ryan Wariner, so he's always there too. So, man, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate everything.
Dude, I really appreciate it too. I've had a good time this morning. It's been cool.
Well, cool. And thanks for getting set up. I know you were out late last night. You've been on tour, so thank you very much for making the time.
Hey, no problem, Craig. Thanks a lot, man.
You're welcome. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend on your social media channels. We certainly appreciate your support and your help with this. Thanks again to Ryan Wariner for spending time with us. I had a good time, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you go to our homepage at everyonelovesguitar.com and sign up to get on our newsletter list. You can get the opportunity to send in some questions to upcoming guests. And most important, pay attention. Remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.